The iron shackles bit into Vivian's wrists, but she didn't flinch. Wouldn't give them that. Not here. Not in front of the whole town that had turned its back when Crowe's men burned her husband's body and called it an accident. Judge Harlan Blackwood, bought and paid for like everything else in this godforsaken territory, adjusted his spectacles and cleared his throat. The sound echoed off the water-stained walls of Black Hollow's courthouse, a building that had seen more crooked verdicts than honest ones. "Mrs. Mercer," Blackwood began, his voice carrying the practiced sympathy of a snake oil salesman, "you stand accused of horse theft. 3 mares belonging to Mr. Caleb Crowe, valued at—" "I didn't steal anything." Vivian's voice cut through his speech like an axe through kindling. The judge's eye twitched. Behind her she heard Crowe's low chuckle, felt it crawl up her spine like a centipede. She didn't turn around. Wouldn't give him that either. "The evidence suggests otherwise," Blackwood continued, shuffling papers he probably couldn't even read. "Mr. Crowe's foreman witnessed you. Crowe's foreman is a liar." She said it loud enough for everyone crammed into that sweltering room to hear. "Same as Crowe, same as you." The gasp that rippled through the crowd was almost worth it. Almost worth what was coming. Blackwood's face went purple. "Mrs. Mercer, I will have order in— You'll have whatever Caleb Crowe pays you to have." The gavel came down like a gunshot. "Contempt! I find you in contempt of—" "Find me in whatever you want," Vivian said, and there was something in her voice now, something that had been building since they'd found Thomas face down in the creek with a bullet in his back. "We all know how this ends. You've already decided. So stop wasting my time and his money and just do it." Silence. The kind that made ears ring. Caleb Crowe stood up slowly from the back bench. He was a big man, made bigger by the 3 gunmen flanking him like shadows. His boots, custom leather from San Francisco, probably cost more than most folks in Black Hollow made in a year, clicked against the warped floorboards as he walked down the center aisle. "Your Honor," Crowe said, his voice smooth as aged whiskey. "If the widow is finished with her tantrum, perhaps we can proceed?" He stopped beside her, close enough that she could smell the cigar smoke clinging to his vest, see the gold watch chain stretching across his considerable gut. Up close, Caleb Crowe looked exactly like what he was, a man who'd never been told no in his entire life. 3 horses, Vivian." He said her name like he was tasting it. "Could have just asked if you needed help. Hell, I would have loaned them to you, but you had to go and steal from me. Now look where we are." "I found those horses on my land," Vivian said, meeting his eyes. "They were flat and dark, like river stones. Your brand was fresh, still bleeding. You put them there yourself so you could take my ranch when I couldn't pay the fine." Crowe smiled. "Prove it." "I don't have to prove anything. You already own the judge, the sheriff, and half the deeds in this territory. What's one more widow's ranch?" Something flickered in Crowe's expression. Irritation, maybe, that she wasn't begging, that she wasn't crying. Women in Black Hollow were supposed to know their place, especially women without men to protect them. "Judge," Crowe said, turning away from her like she'd ceased to exist, "I believe we've heard enough." Blackwood nodded eagerly. "Mrs. Mercer, in light of your continued disrespect for these proceedings and the overwhelming evidence of your guilt, I hereby sentence you to—" The doors blew open. Not slowly, not dramatically. They just exploded inward with a bang that made half the room dive for cover, hinges shrieking as they tore from the frame. Dust and splinters filled the air like a shotgun blast had gone off. And through that dust walked a man. He was tall, not as tall as Crowe, but there was something about the way he moved that made him seem bigger than he was. His duster coat was the color of dried blood, torn and patched in a dozen places. His hat was pulled low, casting shadows across a face marked by old violence, a scar running from his left temple down to his jaw, white against sun-darkened skin. His boots were worn down to nothing, held together with wire and hope, but it was his eyes that made Vivian's breath catch. They were the coldest thing she'd ever seen. Colder than December wind, colder than the ground they'd buried Thomas in. The man walked into that courtroom like he owned it, like everyone in it owed him money. His spurs sang with each step, a high, lonesome sound that raised gooseflesh on Vivian's arms. He didn't look at the judge, didn't look at Crowe's gunmen, though their hands had already dropped to their revolvers. He looked at Vivian. "Sorry I'm late, wife," he said. His voice was rough, like he'd spent years screaming or not talking at all. Got held up in Socorro. Roads are hell this time of year. The courtroom seemed to inhale all at once, a collective gasp that sucked the air from the room. Who the hell are you? Judge Blackwood sputtered. The man reached into his coat, slow, deliberate, giving Crowe's men time to decide if they wanted to die today, and produced a folded piece of paper. He walked up to the bench and dropped it in front of Blackwood. Silas Kane, he said. That there's our marriage certificate. Filed in Santa Fe, August 1871. Territorial stamp and everything. Vivian stared at him. She'd never seen this man before in her life. Blackwood unfolded the document with shaking fingers. His eyes moved across the page, then widened. This can't be... Can't be what? Crowe's voice had lost its smoothness. Let me see that. He snatched the paper from Blackwood's hands, and Vivian watched his face change as he read, watched the color drain from his cheeks, watched his jaw tighten, until she could hear his teeth grinding. Silas Kane is dead, Crowe said, but there was no conviction in it. He died in the Brazos massacre. Everybody knows that. Everybody was wrong. Silas took off his hat, and Vivian saw more scars, a whole roadmap of violence written across his scalp. Took 3 bullets and a knife to the ribs, but I'm a stubborn son of a bitch. Takes more than that to put me down. The gunman flanking Crowe had gone pale. One of them, a skinny kid with a wispy mustache, actually took a step backward. You don't know who that is, Crowe hissed at them. He's nobody. A con man with forged papers trying to... I know who he is, the voice came from the crowd. An old man stood up, his hands twisted with arthritis, his face weathered like old leather. I was there, at Brazos. Watched the Federales shoot him down after he killed 8 of them trying to protect a wagon train of settlers. Watched him fall. Would have sworn he was dead. Me too. Another voice, this one belonging to a woman holding a baby. He saved my family. Took bullets meant for my husband. And mine. He gave us water when we were dying of thirst. Carried my son 10 miles to a doctor. The stories came from everywhere now, people stepping forward, speaking up in a way they hadn't dared to in years. And Vivian realized what she was witnessing, the birth of a legend. Real or not, true or not, Silas Kane was becoming something bigger than just a man in that moment. Crowe's face had gone from pale to red. This is bullshit. Complete bullshit. Judge, you can't possibly, If Mrs. Mercer is married, Blackwood said slowly, looking at the document like it might bite him, then technically the property in question belongs to her husband. And if her husband contests the charges, I contest them. Silas didn't raise his voice, but somehow it filled the entire room. My wife didn't steal a damn thing. Those horses were planted on our land, brands fresh as morning dew. I inspected them myself before I left for Socorro. You weren't even here, Crowe shouted. This is a sham, a setup, and everyone knows it. Prove it, Silas said, throwing Crowe's own words back at him. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of Crowe's breathing, harsh and rapid, like a bull before the charge. His hand drifted toward his hip, where a nickel-plated Colt sat in a hand-tooled holster. Don't. Silas's voice was soft now, almost gentle. Please don't. I'm tired, Caleb. Been riding for 3 days straight. Haven't slept, haven't eaten. Really don't want to kill you right now, but I absolutely will if you draw that weapon. You threatening me? Crowe's hand was still on his gun. Stating facts. You draw, I draw faster. Your boys draw. I kill you first, then them. That's not a threat. That's just how it works. One of Crowe's gunmen cleared his throat. Boss, maybe we should... Shut up. Crowe's eyes never left Silas. You think you can just walk in here and... I think, Silas interrupted, that you've been terrorizing this territory for too long. I think you've gotten used to people being afraid. And I think you've forgotten what it's like when someone ain't. He took a step forward. Just one. But something about it made Crowe's hand drop away from his weapon. Now, Silas continued, the way I see it, you got 2 choices. You can accept that this trial is over and walk out of here with your pride bruised but your body intact. Or you can push this further and we can see how it plays out. Your call. The courthouse had gone so quiet, Vivian could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears, could hear the baby in the back row whimpering. could hear Crowe's leather gun belt creaking as his hand clenched and unclenched. Finally, Crowe turned to Judge Blackwood. "This isn't over." "The case is dismissed," Blackwood said quickly, almost falling over himself to get the words out. "Lack of evidence, conflicting testimony, and the legal complexity introduced by Mr. Kane's marriage claim. Dismissed." The gavel came down. This time it sounded like a door closing, or maybe opening. Crowe walked out without another word, his gunmen trailing behind him like whipped dogs. But as he passed Silas, he leaned in close enough to whisper, "I'll burn everything you love." "Get in line," Silas said. Then they were gone, and the courthouse erupted into chaos. People shouting, crying, laughing. Someone was already spreading the story, adding details that hadn't happened. By tomorrow, Silas Kane would have killed 20 men at Brazos. By next week, he'd have died and come back from hell itself. Vivian stood there in her chains, staring at this stranger who'd just claimed to be her husband, and felt nothing but confusion. "Unlock her," Silas said to the deputy who'd been standing frozen by the wall. "Now!" The deputy fumbled with his keys, and a moment later the shackles fell away. Vivian rubbed her wrists, feeling blood rush back into her fingers. "Thank you," she said, because it seemed like something she should say. Silas put his hat back on. "We should talk. Somewhere private." I know you don't know me. I know this looks crazy. But if we don't talk right now, away from all these people, you're going to be dead by sunset. So are your kids. So please, Mrs. Mercer, just trust me for the next hour." She looked into those cold eyes and saw something she hadn't expected. Sincerity. Maybe even fear. "My ranch," she said. "It's an hour north. Too far. Too exposed. Crowe will have men on the road already." He glanced around the emptying courthouse. "The church. The old one, north end of town. Meet me there in 20 minutes. Come alone, and for the love of, just make sure nobody follows you." He walked out before she could respond, disappearing into the afternoon sun like smoke. Vivian stood there, surrounded by people congratulating her, touching her arm, telling her how brave she was. But all she could think about was the look in Crowe's eyes as he'd walked out, the promise of violence in that whisper. "I'll burn everything you love." She had 2 children. Emily was 9, Samuel was 6. They were at the ranch right now with old Martha, the widow who helped with the chores in exchange for a roof over her head. If Crowe sent his men there, Mrs. Mercer? The old man who'd spoken up during the trial stood beside her, his hat in his hands. "That man who came in. Silas Kane. You really married to him?" She didn't know how to answer that. Didn't know what the truth was anymore. "It's complicated." "Well, complicated or not, you just became the most interesting person in Black Hollow. Folks are going to be talking about this for years." He smiled, gaps showing where teeth used to be. "Hell of a thing, watching someone stand up to Crowe like that. Gives an old man hope." Hope. The word felt foreign. Vivian hadn't had hope since they'd pulled Thomas's body from the water. Hadn't had anything but rage and grief and the determination to keep her children alive. "I need to go," she said. "Need to check on my kids." "Best hurry then. Crowe's not the forgiving type." She knew that. Had known it from the moment her husband had refused to sell their land. Thomas had stood in their kitchen, hands shaking but voice steady, and told Crowe's representative that the Mercer Ranch wasn't for sale at any price. 3 days later, he was dead. "Drowned," the sheriff had said. "Must have been drinking and fell in the creek." Thomas hadn't touched alcohol in 10 years. Vivian pushed through the crowd and stepped out into the brutal afternoon heat. Black Hollow sprawled before her, a collection of sun-bleached buildings and broken dreams clustered around a single dirt road. The saloon, the general store, the blacksmith's forge, belching smoke into a sky the color of old bone, and beyond it all, the vast emptiness of the frontier, miles and miles of nothing in every direction. Crowe owned most of it now. Bought it up piece by piece, driving out anyone who wouldn't sell. Burning, threatening, killing. The law didn't touch him. The territorial government didn't care. Out here, Caleb Crowe was the law. Until today. Vivian walked toward the stable where she'd left her horse, her mind racing. That marriage certificate had looked real. The signatures, the stamp, everything. But she'd never been to Santa Fe in August 1871. Had been pregnant with Samuel that summer, barely able to leave the house. So how... Mrs. Mercer. She spun around, hand instinctively going to the knife she kept in her boot. But it was just Billy Harper, the teenage son of the stable owner. He looked nervous, kept glancing over his shoulder. "What is it, Billy?" "My pa wanted me to tell you, Crowe's men were just here, took 4 horses, heavily armed. They rode north." North. Toward her ranch. "When?" The word came out strangled. "Maybe 10 minutes ago. I'm sorry, ma'am. Pa didn't dare stop them." She was already running. Forget the church. Forget Silas Kane and his mysterious intervention. Her children were alone. Martha was 70 years old and couldn't lift a rifle if her life depended on it. And Crowe's men were riding toward them with violence in their hearts. The stable was dim and smelled like hay and horse sweat. Vivian's mare, a temperamental beast named Jezebel that Thomas had bought at auction, stamped her hooves impatiently. "Going somewhere?" Vivian nearly jumped out of her skin. Silas Kane stood in the shadows by the back stall, arms crossed, looking like he'd been there for hours. "How did you—" "Figured you'd run. It's what I'd do, but those men have a 10-minute head start and fresh horses. You won't make it in time." "I have to try. My children—" "Will be fine. Crowe wants you, not them. Not yet, anyway. Right now, he's trying to scare you, show you what he can do. But if you ride out there alone, you'll be dead before you reach your front porch, and then your kids really will be orphans." Vivian's hand found the knife in her boot. "Give me one good reason not to gut you right now. Because I'm the only person in this territory who can keep you alive long enough to fight back." Silas stepped into the light, and she saw exhaustion etched into every line of his face. "I know you don't trust me. I know this is insane. But I also know Caleb Crowe, and I know that right now he's sitting in his study trying to decide the best way to make an example of you. We have maybe an hour before he decides. Maybe less. You don't know anything about— Your husband was Thomas Mercer. He drowned in Bell Creek 3 months ago, except he didn't drown because Thomas could swim like a fish, and the water was only 3 feet deep where they found him. He had a bullet in his back, small caliber, probably a .32. Sheriff Monroe, who's been on Crowe's payroll since before you moved here, ruled it an accident without doing any investigation. You've got 2 kids, a failing ranch, and about 6 months before Crowe manufactures enough legal trouble to take everything you own." Silas paused. "How am I doing so far?" Vivian felt the knife slip from her fingers. "Who are you?" "Someone who should have stopped Crowe a long time ago. Someone who tried and failed and lost everything because of it." He picked up her knife and held it out to her, handle first. "I can't undo what happened to your husband. Can't bring him back. But I can help you fight. If you want." "Why?" She took the knife, slid it back into her boot. "Why now? Why me?" "Because I'm tired of running. Tired of hearing about good people dying while Crowe gets richer. And because—" He looked away, jaw working. "Because I was married once. Had a family. And Crowe took them from me, same as he took your husband. So maybe I'm doing this for selfish reasons. Maybe I just want to watch him burn. Does it matter? It should have mattered. Should have raised 100 red flags." But Vivian found herself thinking about Emily's laugh, about Samuel's habit of collecting rocks, about the way Thomas used to dance with her in the kitchen when he thought nobody was watching, thought about all the things Crowe wanted to destroy. "That marriage certificate," she said. "How?" "Paid a clerk in Santa Fe to backdate it. Cost me 3 months' wages and a bottle of good whiskey, but territorial records are sloppy out here. By the time anyone checks, if they check, the story will be too widespread to debunk." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "People want to believe in legends, Mrs. Mercer, especially out here. So I gave them one." "Silas Kane," she said slowly. "The man from Brazos. That was real?" "Some of it. I was there. Did some things I'm not proud of. Killed some men who probably deserved it. Then got shot more times than a man should survive and somehow didn't die." He shrugged. "Everything else is embellishment. But embellishment is useful when you're trying to scare a man like Crowe." "And you think you can scare him?" "No," Silas said. "I think I can kill him. Eventually. But first we need to keep you alive long enough to make it hurt." Outside, someone was shouting. Vivian heard boots on dirt, the jangle of spurs. More of Crowe's men, probably. The net was closing. "The church," she said. "You mentioned the old church." "North end of town. Nobody uses it anymore, but the walls are thick and there's only one entrance. We can defend it if we have to, and we can see your ranch from the bell tower, make sure your kids are safe. And then? Then we figure out how to burn Caleb Crowe's empire to the ground, one way or another. Vivian looked at this stranger, this scarred man who'd walked into her life wearing a legend like a coat. Looked at the way his hand never strayed far from his revolver, the way his eyes constantly scanned for threats. He was dangerous, probably crazy, definitely running from something. But he was also the first person in 3 months who'd stood beside her instead of running away. 20 minutes, she said. I need to get a message to Martha, make sure the kids stay inside. Then I'll meet you at the church. Silas nodded and started to leave, then paused. Mrs. Mercer? That thing you did in the courtroom, calling out the judge like that? Most people would have begged, would have cried and pleaded and made it easy for them. I'm not most people. No, he said softly. No, you're not. Crowe's going to learn that the hard way. Then he was gone, slipping out the back of the stable like a ghost. Vivian stood there for a long moment, listening to her heart pound. Then she climbed onto Jezebel and rode. The church was exactly where Silas had said it would be, sitting on the edge of town like a rotting tooth. The paint had long since peeled away, leaving sun-bleached wood the color of bone. The cross on the roof tilted at a drunken angle, and most of the windows were broken. But the walls were solid adobe, 3 feet thick, and the heavy oak doors looked like they could stop a cannonball. Silas was already inside when she arrived, moving through the space with the efficiency of someone who'd defended positions before. He'd dragged pews in front of the windows, creating makeshift barriers, had stacked old hymnals to block the gaps in the broken glass. You sure about this? Vivian asked, tying Jezebel to a post outside. No, but I'm sure about what happens if we don't. Come on, tower's this way. They climbed the narrow stairs to the bell tower, and Vivian's breath caught when she reached the top. From here, she could see everything. The whole town spread out below them like a map, the road leading north toward her ranch, and in the distance, rising from her property like smoke from a fire. No, she whispered. Dust. A column of it, maybe a mile out, heading straight for her home. Riders, Silas said, his voice grim. Looks like 8, maybe 10, moving fast. My children. Look, he pointed. That's your ranch, right? The house with the red roof? Yes. I see someone on the porch. Older woman moving around. That your Martha? Vivian squinted against the sun. I think so. And there, 2 small figures, one running, one sitting. Your kids? She could barely breathe. Emily and Samuel. They're okay for now, but those riders will be there in about 15 minutes. You need to decide what we're doing. Vivian spun on him. We're going after them. We're outnumbered 5-1. They're better armed, and they know you're coming. We ride in. We die. Your kids watch it happen. Then Crowe takes them, raises them as his own, tells everyone how tragic it was, how he tried to help, but you were just too stubborn. Silas met her eyes. That what you want? So what? We just stand here? No. We watch. We wait. And when they leave, because they will leave once they realize you're not there, we follow them. Find out where Crowe's keeping his men, what his plans are. Then we strike when he doesn't expect it. And if they hurt my children? They won't. Silas sounded certain. Crowe's not stupid. He knows killing kids would turn the whole territory against him, even with all his money. He wants to scare you, break you, make you give up. But he won't cross that line. Not yet. Vivian wanted to argue, wanted to scream and fight and ride out there anyway, but she could see the truth in his words, could see the tactical reality of their situation. I hate this, she said. Good. Use that, because we're going to need it. They watched in tense silence as the riders closed in on the ranch. Vivian's face clenched the windowsill so hard her knuckles went white. She could see Martha now, standing on the porch with something in her hands. A rifle, probably. Though it wouldn't do her any good against that many men. The riders circled the house once, twice. One of them dismounted, walked up to the porch. Even from this distance, Vivian could see Martha's posture, defiant, refusing to back down. The rider talked to her for a minute, then laughed and walked back to his horse. What are they doing? Vivian's voice was barely a whisper. Delivering a message. Watch. The riders formed a line facing the house. Then, as one, they drew their revolvers and fired into the air. The sound reached the church a moment later, a rolling thunder of gunshots that sent birds exploding from the trees. They fired until their chambers were empty, then reloaded and did it again. Vivian could see her children now, pressed against the window, could see Martha pushing them back into the house, could see the terror even from a mile away. "I'm going to kill him," she said quietly. "I'm going to put a bullet in Caleb Crowe's head and watch him bleed." "Get in line," Silas said again. The riders finished their display and turned south, riding back toward town, but not toward Crowe's main compound. They veered west instead, toward the old mining camp where Crowe kept his overflow crew. "There," Silas said, that's where they're staging from. Good to know." Vivian barely heard him. She was already heading for the stairs, already planning the fastest route to her ranch. "Wait." Silas caught her arm. "Give them 10 minutes. Make sure they're really gone." "My children are fine. Look," he pointed. "Your Martha's waving them off, giving them a piece of her mind from the looks of it. Gutsy lady." Despite everything, Vivian felt a smile tug at her lips. Martha had been with them for 2 years, and the old woman had never backed down from anything, not even this. 10 minutes, she said. "Then I'm leaving with or without you." "Wouldn't dream of stopping you." They waited, watching as the dust settled and her ranch returned to its deceptive calm. Vivian counted the seconds, her mind racing through everything she needed to do. Get the kids, pack supplies, maybe send them to her sister in Denver until this was over. Except they didn't have money for that. Didn't have money for much of anything anymore. "That certificate," she said suddenly, "the marriage one. It said August 1871. Why that date?" Silas was quiet for a moment. "That's when my wife died. When Crowe's men burned our homestead and killed everyone inside. Figured if I was going to lie about being married, might as well make it mean something." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. That's what I'm counting on him thinking too. That I'm emotional, reckless, easy to predict. But I'm not. I've had 3 years to plan this. 3 years to learn everything about Caleb Crowe, where he sleeps, who he trusts, what he fears, and now I've got something he doesn't expect." "What's that?" "You. A woman with nothing left to lose who's not afraid to spit in his face. That's dangerous, Mrs. Mercer. That's the kind of thing that starts fires." The 10 minutes crawled by like hours. Finally, Silas nodded. "All right, let's go. But we ride careful, stay off the main road, and if we see anyone coming, we run. No heroics. Not yet." "I don't do heroics. I do what needs doing." "Good. That's what keeps you alive." They made it to the ranch without incident, though Vivian's nerves were stretched so tight she jumped at every shadow. When they finally rode up to the house, Martha was waiting on the porch with that rifle, though she lowered it when she recognized Vivian. "Took you long enough," the old woman said. "We had visitors." "I saw. Are Emily and Samuel scared, but fine. I told them it was just some men acting foolish. Didn't mention the part about them threatening to burn us all alive if you didn't surrender to Mr. Crowe within 3 days. Vivian felt her blood turn to ice. 3 days? That's what the big one said. The one with the scar on his neck. Said Crowe's being generous, giving you time to think it over. Said if you're smart, you'll sign over the deed and leave the territory. And if you're not... Martha trailed off, glancing at Silas. "Who's this?" "That's, complicated." "I'm her husband," Silas said, dismounting. "Silas Kane. Pleasure to meet you, ma'am." Martha looked him up and down, taking in the scars, the worn clothing, the revolver that looked like it had seen more use than most men's tools. "Husband." "Right. And I'm the Queen of England." She turned back to Vivian. "You want to tell me what's really going on, or should I just start packing?" So Vivian told her everything, the trial, Silas's intervention, the forged certificate, the plan that wasn't really a plan. When she finished, Martha was quiet for a long moment. "Well," the old woman finally said, "I've heard dumber ideas. Not many, but a few." She looked at Silas. "You really think you can take down Caleb Crowe?" "No," Silas said honestly, "but I think we can make him bleed enough that someone else finishes the job. The territorial governor, maybe. Or the U.S. Marshals if we can get their attention. Crow's gotten away with this because nobody's really fought back. But if we make enough noise, cause enough damage, eventually someone will have to listen. Or we'll all end up dead. That's also a possibility. Martha snorted. At least you're honest. She turned to head inside, then paused. Emily and Samuel don't know about any of this. As far as they're concerned, you're checking on some supplies in town. I suggest we keep it that way until we figure out what we're actually doing. Agreed, Vivian said. Can you keep them inside for now? I need to talk to Silas, figure out our next move. Our next move is to get them out of here, Silas said once Martha had gone inside. Your sister in Denver, you said she'd take them. I said we don't have money for that. I have some saved, not much, but enough for train tickets. We put them on tomorrow's stage to Alamosa. They can catch the Denver and Rio Grande from there. They'll be safe, and you'll be able to focus on staying alive. Vivian wanted to argue, wanted to keep her children close, but she'd seen the look in that rider's eyes when he'd fired his gun at her house, had seen what men like that were capable of. Okay, she said quietly, but I'm the one who tells them, and I'm not lying about why. They deserve to know the truth. Fair enough. They spent the next hour making plans. Silas sketched out a map of Crow's holdings, marking the locations of his men, his supply routes, the weak points in his organization. There were more than Vivian had expected. Crowe had his fingers in everything from cattle to lumber to water rights. He's been building an empire, Silas explained. Not just a ranch. He wants to own the whole territory, control every resource. And he's close. Maybe a year away from having enough leverage to basically write his own laws. So how do we stop him? We make it expensive. Hurt his operations, cost him money, force him to spend resources protecting what he's already got instead of expanding. And we do it loud enough that people take notice. Right now, Crowe operates in the shadows. We drag him into the light. You make it sound easy. It's not. It's going to be dangerous and probably stupid and might not work at all. But it's better than giving up. They were still planning when Emily and Samuel burst through the door, faces lit up with excitement. Mama! Emily threw her arms around Vivian. Martha said you were back. We heard guns and she made us stay inside, but I know, sweetheart. I know. Come here, both of you. We need to talk. She sat them down at the kitchen table, the same table where Thomas used to do his accounts, where they'd shared countless meals, and told them a simplified version of the truth, that some bad men wanted their ranch, that their mama had made powerful enemies, and that they were going to go stay with Aunt Sarah in Denver for a little while, just until things settled down. But what about you? Samuel's voice was small, frightened. I'll be fine. Mr. Kain is going to help me, and as soon as it's safe, I'll come get you. I promise. Is this about Daddy? Emily was 9, old enough to understand more than Vivian wished she did. About what really happened to him. The question hit like a fist. Yes, Vivian said, because she wouldn't lie. Not about this. The man who hurt Daddy is trying to hurt us now. But I'm not going to let him. I'm going to fight back, and I'm going to win. How do you know? Because, Vivian said, pulling her children close, I have something to fight for, and that makes me dangerous. They spent the rest of the evening packing, moving through the familiar motions of a life about to be disrupted. Clothes, books, Samuel's collection of interesting rocks, small treasures that meant everything. Silas spent the time checking the perimeter, making sure Crowe's men hadn't come back. When he returned, he found Vivian sitting on the porch, staring out at the land her husband had died for. They asleep? He asked. Finally, Emily didn't want to go, kept saying she should stay and fight. She's too much like me. That's not a bad thing. It is if it gets her killed. Vivian rubbed her face. I don't know if I can do this. Send them away. Take on Crowe. It feels like I'm giving up. You're keeping them alive. That's not giving up. That's being smart. Silas sat down beside her. My daughter was 7 when she died. Emma. Had your Emily's fire. Used to tell me she was going to run the ranch someday. Make it the biggest in the territory. And I believed her. She was that kind of kid. I'm sorry. The thing I've learned, Silas continued, is that the best revenge isn't violence. It's not killing the men who hurt you. It's building something they couldn't destroy. Your kids, growing up strong and safe in Denver, eventually coming back here to reclaim what's theirs. That's the real victory. That's what Crowe can't take away. And what if I don't make it that far? Then they know their mama died fighting, that she didn't give up, didn't give in. There are worse legacies. They sat in silence for a while, watching the sun sink toward the horizon. Tomorrow would bring new dangers, new decisions. But for now, just for tonight, there was peace. "Thank you," Vivian said eventually, "for what you did today. In the courtroom, you didn't have to Yes, I did. I've been running for 3 years trying to figure out how to hurt Crowe without destroying myself in the process. And then I heard about your trial, about a widow being railroaded by the same man who killed my family, and I realized this was it. This was how I stopped running. By lying about being married to me? By giving us both a weapon he doesn't expect. Legal protection, even if it's built on fraud. A story people want to believe. And most importantly, hope. The people in that courtroom today saw someone stand up to Crowe and live. That matters more than you know. Or it paints a target on my back. That target was already there, Mrs. Mercer. I just made sure you weren't standing alone when Crowe came for you. The sun finally dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of red and gold. Like fire, Vivian thought. Like the fire that was coming whether she wanted it or not. 3 days, she said. That's what they gave me. Then we better make them count. The stage left at dawn, which meant Vivian had exactly 4 hours to get her children packed, fed, and out of Black Hollow before Crowe's men realized what was happening. She hadn't slept. Neither had Silas, who'd spent the night watching the road from the bell tower of that ruined church, his rifle across his knees. Emily cried when they loaded her trunk onto the stage. Not loud, dramatic tears. She was too much her mother's daughter for that, but quiet ones that hurt worse to watch. Samuel just held on to Vivian's hand like if he squeezed hard enough, he could stop time. I don't want to go, Emily said for the 20th time. I know, sweetheart. Then let us stay. We can help. I can shoot. Daddy taught me. Vivian knelt down, ignoring the suspicious looks from the other passengers already aboard. Your daddy taught you to shoot rabbits. This is different. These are bad men, and they won't hesitate just because you're a child. I need you to be brave now. Can you do that for me? Emily wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Will you really come get us? It was the one question Vivian couldn't answer honestly, so she lied. I promise. As soon as this is over, I'll be on the next stage to Denver. Martha climbed aboard next, her old bones protesting every step. She'd insisted on going with the children, wouldn't hear otherwise. Someone's got to make sure they don't get into trouble, she'd said. And you need to focus on not getting yourself killed. Now she leaned out the window and fixed Vivian with a look that could strip paint. You listen to me, girl. I've known you 3 years, and I've never seen you back down from anything. But this man Crowe, he's not like the coyotes that get into the henhouse. He's worse, so you be smart. And if being smart means running, you run. You hear me? I hear you. I'm serious. Pride's got no place in survival. The stage driver called out his final warning. Samuel finally let go of Vivian's hand, and she watched her children pull away, their faces pressed against the glass until the dust swallowed them whole. Silas appeared beside her, moving quiet as smoke. They'll be fine. That stage runs the route twice a week. Never had problems. And your sister in Denver, she knows they're coming? I sent a telegram yesterday. She'll meet them at the station. Vivian kept staring at the empty road. I should have gone with them. Then Crowe wins. Takes your land, adds it to his empire, and in 5 years nobody even remembers you existed. That what Thomas would have wanted? She turned on him then, anger flashing hot. Don't you dare bring up my husband. You didn't know him. You don't get to... Oh! You're right. I didn't know him, but I know you. Known you exactly 1 day, and I can already tell you're not the kind of person who runs. So stop second-guessing yourself and let's get to work. The anger drained as fast as it had come, leaving only exhaustion. What work? We're 2 people against an army. We don't have money, influence, or enough ammunition to fight our way out of a paper bag. We have something better. We have his attention. Silas started walking back toward the church, assuming she'd follow. She did. Right now, Crowe's sitting in his compound trying to figure out his next move. He expected you to fold after yesterday. Instead, you sent your kids away, which means you're preparing for a fight. That makes him nervous. Good. Let him be nervous. Nervous men make mistakes, and mistakes are what we need. They spent the morning turning the abandoned church into something that could pass for a stronghold. Silas had experience with this sort of thing. You could see it in the way he moved, the efficient placement of their limited supplies. He barricaded the doors, reinforced the windows, created firing positions with overlapping angles. It wouldn't stop a determined assault, but it might buy them time. You did this before, Vivian observed, watching him work. The fortification. You've defended positions. Army briefly, then some other things I'm not proud of. Turns out I'm good at violence. Not much else, but that one thing I can do. And you think violence is the answer here? I think violence is the only language Caleb Crowe speaks. But we need to be smart about it. Surgical. Make him bleed without getting ourselves killed. He hammered a nail into a plank. Tell me about his operation. What do you know about how he runs things? Vivian thought back over the past year, all the conversations she'd overheard, the patterns she'd noticed. He's got about 40 men working for him directly, gun hands mostly. Another 100 or so who work his ranches and mines, but they're not fighters. His main compound is south of town, big place with stone walls. He moved there after his wife died, some kind of fortress he had built. Nobody gets in without permission. Water? Well in the courtyard. Deep one from what I've heard. He could hold out for months if he had to. Silas swore under his breath. Of course he could. What about his business interests? Where's his money coming from? Cattle, mainly, but also timber from the mountain camps, some mining operations up north. And he's been buying up water rights, charging farmers for access to the river. That's what started the trouble with Thomas. We refused to pay. Water rights. Silas stopped hammering. Now that's interesting. You cut off someone's water, you cut off everything. Cattle die, crops fail, mines can't operate. The whole territory depends on that river. So what are you thinking? I'm thinking maybe we don't need to attack Crowe directly. Maybe we just need to hurt him where it matters most. His wallet. Before Vivian could respond, they heard horses. Multiple riders, moving fast. She and Silas exchanged a glance and moved to the windows, keeping low. 6 men reined up in front of the church. Vivian recognized the one in front, Dutch Keller, Crowe's foreman. A hard man with a reputation for cruelty, the kind who enjoyed his work a little too much. Mrs. Mercer, Dutch called out. I know you're in there. Mr. Crowe wants to talk. Tell Mr. Crowe to go to hell, Vivian shouted back. Dutch laughed. Now that's not very friendly. And here he sent me all this way just to deliver an invitation. He's having a gathering tonight. All the local landowners, wants to discuss a peaceful resolution to your current difficulties. Is that what we're calling it? Difficulties? Call it whatever you want. Point is, Mr. Crowe's willing to forget this whole ugly business if you're willing to negotiate in good faith. Sign over the ranch, take a fair price, and move on with your life. Nobody else has to get hurt. Silas touched her arm, shook his head. But Vivian had already made up her mind. Tell Mr. Crowe I'll think about it. Thinking's good. Smart woman like you, I'm sure you'll make the right choice. Dutch tipped his hat. Gathering's at 8 tonight. Don't be late. They rode off in a cloud of dust, and Silas turned to her with murder in his eyes. Please tell me you're not actually considering, of course not, but if Crowe's gathering all his people in one place tonight, that means his operations are going to be vulnerable. Skeleton crews, minimal security. It's an opportunity. Understanding dawned on Silas's face. You want to hit him while he's distracted. I want to burn something he can't replace. Make him understand that this isn't going to be easy, that I'm not just going to roll over and die. Vivian walked to the table where Silas had laid out his maps. You said he's got timber operations. Where? North Camp, about 8 miles up the mountain road. They're cutting pine, storing it in a lumberyard before shipping it south. Worth maybe $20,000, possibly more. Then that's where we go, tonight, while he's waiting for me to show up at his gathering. Silas studied her face. You understand what you're suggesting? Arson's a hanging offense, and it won't just hurt Crowe. That timber yard employs local men. Burning it puts them out of work. Those men work for a murderer. They know what he is, and they take his money anyway. I'm done feeling sorry for people who chose the wrong side. Vivian met his eyes. Are you with me or not? I'm with you. Just wanted to make sure you'd thought it through. He rolled up the map. We'll need supplies, kerosene, matches, something to carry it in, and we'll need to move fast, in and out before anyone realizes what's happening. There's a general store on the edge of town. Owner's name is Pete Walsh. He and Thomas were friends. He might help. Or he might run straight to Crowe. He won't. Pete lost his son 2 years ago, land dispute with Crowe that turned violent. He's got his own reasons for wanting to see that man burn. They left the church through a back exit Silas had cleared earlier, keeping to the alleys and side streets. Black Hollow was quiet at midday, most people hiding indoors from the brutal heat. The few who saw them either looked away quickly or nodded. Word had spread about yesterday's courtroom drama, and apparently Vivian had become either a hero or a fool, depending on who you asked. Pete Walsh's store sat at the eastern edge of town, a sagging building that smelled like tobacco and sadness. Pete himself was behind the counter, a rail-thin man with nervous hands and eyes that never stopped moving. He looked up when they entered, and Vivian saw recognition followed immediately by fear. "Mrs. Mercer, I heard what happened. Terrible business, just terrible." His gaze shifted to Silas. "And you must be the famous Silas Kane. Word is you died at Brazos." Word was wrong. Seems to be a lot of that going around. Pete's hands fidgeted with a rag. "What can I do for you folks? Though I should tell you, Crowe's men came by this morning. Said anyone caught helping you would be considered an enemy, and I got a family to think about." "I understand," Vivian said, "and I'm not asking you to take sides. I just need some supplies. Kerosene mostly, enough to fill maybe 3 or 4 bottles. I'll pay cash." Pete's eyes narrowed. "Kerosene, that's an interesting request. Mind if I ask what you're planning to do with it?" "Better you don't know." "Better I do, actually. Because if you're planning what I think you're planning, you're going to need more than kerosene. You're going to need a distraction." Silas's hand had drifted toward his gun. "You planning to turn us in, Pete?" "Hell no. I'm planning to help." Pete disappeared into the back room and returned with a wooden crate. Inside were bottles, rags, and 2 large tins of kerosene. "My son James wanted to be a lawman. Did I ever tell you that, Mrs. Mercer? Had his whole life planned out. Then Crowe decided he wanted our water access, and James tried to stop him. They found his body 3 days later. Sheriff said it was a riding accident." "I'm sorry," Vivian said quietly. "Don't be sorry. Be effective." Pete pushed the crate across the counter. "You're going after the timber operation, right? It's the only thing that makes sense. Crowe's gathering everyone tonight, which means the North Camp is going to be practically empty. Maybe 5 or 6 guards, tops." "How do you know about the gathering?" "Because I got invited. All the business owners did. It's Crowe's way of showing power, making sure we all remember who's in charge. But I'm not going. Told his men I was sick, so I'll be free tonight to create that distraction I mentioned." Silas leaned forward. "What kind of distraction?" "South end of town, there's an old warehouse full of hay. Been meaning to clear it out for months, but never got around to it. Dry as bone, catches fire easy. I lighted up around 9 o'clock. Fire brigades got to respond. That pulls attention away from you heading north. By the time anyone realizes what's really happening, you'll be long gone." It was a good plan. Maybe too good. Vivian studied Pete's face, looking for signs of deception, but all she saw was grief and determination. A man who'd lost everything and was finally ready to fight back. "Why now?" she asked. "You've had 2 years to do something. Because 2 years ago, I was alone. But you stood up in that courtroom yesterday and called Crowe exactly what he is. And people noticed. People are talking. For the first time in years, folks in this town are remembering they don't have to be afraid." Pete's voice cracked. "My son deserves better than a father who just rolled over. So, yeah, I'm helping, and I don't care what it costs me." They loaded the supplies into saddlebags, working quickly. Pete threw in some jerky and hardtack, supplies for the road. As they were leaving, he caught Vivian's arm. "You're not coming back, are you? After tonight, I mean. You'll have to run." "I don't know yet. Maybe. Do me a favor. If you do run, take some of these people with you. The ones who want out but are too scared to leave on their own. There's a school teacher, Miss Sarah Chen. She's been trying to organize folks, get them to stand up for themselves. Crowe doesn't like that. Neither does the town council. She could use someone like you." "I'll think about it." "That's all I ask." They made it back to the church without incident, though Vivian felt eyes on them the whole way. The town was waking up, becoming aware that something was shifting. You could feel it in the air, a kind of electric tension that made her skin crawl. Inside, Silas immediately started preparing the bottles. He worked with practiced efficiency, pouring kerosene, stuffing rags into the necks, creating what he called fire bottles. Vivian watched, fascinated despite herself. You've done this before too, she observed. Unfortunately. During the war, sometimes it was the only way to fight back against superior numbers. Light everything on fire and run like hell. He glanced at her. You sure about this? Once we cross this line, there's no going back. You'll be an outlaw, a criminal. Everything you do from here on out will be colored by this decision. I became an outlaw the moment I refused to give Crowe what he wanted. At least this way I'll deserve the reputation. They spent the afternoon planning every detail. The route to the north camp, the layout of the timber yard, escape paths if things went wrong. Silas sketched it all out on paper, committing it to memory before burning the evidence. He was thorough, methodical, and Vivian found herself grateful for his presence. Alone, she would have just charged in angry. With him, she at least had a chance of surviving. As the sun began its descent, painting the sky in shades of orange and red, they made their final preparations. Vivian checked her rifle. An old Winchester that had belonged to Thomas, its stock worn smooth from years of use. Silas cleaned his revolver, each movement precise and controlled. You ever kill anyone? He asked suddenly. The question caught her off guard. No, shot at coyotes, killed plenty of rabbits, but never a person. Might have to tonight. Guards at that timber yard aren't going to just let us waltz in and burn everything down. And if it comes to it, if it's you or them, you need to be able to pull that trigger without hesitating. Can you do that? Vivian thought about Thomas's body, cold and still in the coffin. Thought about her children crying themselves to sleep. Thought about every person in Black Hollow who'd turned away rather than help. Yes, she said. I can do that. Good, because hesitation gets you killed. Remember that. They left the church as darkness fell, moving through shadows like ghosts. The town was lit up for Crowe's gathering, torches and lanterns blazing, making it easy to see who was heading to his compound and who was staying away. Vivian recognized faces as they rode past. The banker, the doctor, the owner of the saloon, all of them dressed in their finest, all of them climbing into carriages like they were going to a party instead of paying tribute to a tyrant. The mountain road was steep and treacherous in the dark, but Silas seemed to know every turn. He'd scouted it earlier, he explained. Always scout before you strike. It was one of his rules. They were maybe 3 miles out when they heard the explosion. Not a real explosion, more like a massive crash followed by screaming. Vivian and Silas exchanged glances and urged their horses faster, rounding a bend to find chaos blocking the road ahead. A wagon had overturned, spilling its cargo across the narrow path. But it wasn't just any wagon. It was one of Crowe's, marked with his brand. And the cargo wasn't supplies. It was people. 6 of them, maybe 7, all bound and gagged. They'd been thrown from the wagon when it crashed, and now they lay in the dirt moaning. The driver was dead, his neck bent at an impossible angle. The horses were screaming, tangled in their traces. What the hell? Silas dismounted, moving cautiously toward the scene. Vivian followed, her rifle ready. As they got closer, she recognized one of the prisoners, a young woman with dark hair and terrified eyes. The schoolteacher Pete had mentioned, Sarah Chen. Cut them loose, Vivian said, already moving to help. Wait, Silas grabbed her arm. This could be a trap. Crowe could have set this up, hoping we'd stop. Look around. You see anyone? The driver's dead, the wagon's destroyed. This wasn't planned. She had a point. They worked quickly, cutting ropes and removing gags. The prisoners were in bad shape, bruised, bleeding, some barely conscious. Sarah Chen was the first to speak, her voice hoarse. Mrs. Mercer? Is that really you? It's me. What happened? Crowe's men. They came for us this afternoon, said we were troublemakers, spreading sedition. They were taking us to the compound for questioning, but the driver was drunk. Took the turn too fast and lost control. Questioning. Silas's voice was flat. That's what we're calling it now? Sarah met his eyes. They were going to kill us. Make examples. I heard them talking. Vivian felt rage surge through her, hot and clean. How many of you were there? 7. But Martha Higgins, the seamstress, she's hurt bad. I don't think she's going to make it. They found Martha at the bottom of the ravine, her body broken by the fall. She was still breathing, but barely. Vivian knelt beside her, taking her hand. I'm here, Vivian said softly. You're not alone. Martha's eyes flickered open. Tell my son. Tell him I fought back. This time, I fought back. Then she was gone, and Vivian was left holding the hand of a woman she barely knew, a woman who died for the crime of being inconvenient. We need to move, Silas said. That crash would have been heard for miles. Crowe's men will be coming. We can't just leave her. We don't have a choice. And we've got 6 more people who need help. So make a decision, Mrs. Mercer. Stay here and get captured, or move and maybe save someone. It was harsh, but he was right. Vivian closed Martha's eyes and stood. Can any of you ride? The prisoners looked at each other. Most nodded, though a few seemed too dazed to understand the question. Then get on those horses from the wagon. We're going north. North? Sarah looked confused. But town is south. Town is full of Crowe's men. North is where we're going to hurt him. You can come with us or take your chances alone. Your choice. They chose to come. The group that rode toward the timber camp was twice as large as Vivian had planned. 7 people instead of 2, most of them injured, none of them trained for what was coming. It should have been a disaster. Maybe it would be. But as they rode through the darkness, Vivian felt something shift. She wasn't alone anymore. Wasn't just one widow against an empire. She was becoming something else, something more dangerous. The timber camp sat in a valley, surrounded by pines. Even from a distance, Vivian could smell the fresh-cut wood, see the massive stacks of lumber waiting to be shipped. There were lights in the buildings, bunkhouses probably, where the workers slept, and guards, just like Pete had said. She counted 5 patrolling the perimeter. We split up, Silas said quietly. I take the east side with the bottles, you take the west. These others stay back, watch the horses, be ready to run if things go bad. We light it up simultaneously, overwhelm their response. With any luck, they'll be too busy fighting the fire to chase us. And if we don't have luck, then we improvise. Story of my life. They distributed the fire bottles, Vivian taking 3, Silas taking 4. The others, Sarah and the rest, were to wait in the trees with the horses. If shooting started, they were to run. No heroics, no trying to help. Just survive. Mrs. Mercer, Sarah whispered as they prepared to move. Thank you for stopping, for helping us. Thank me when we're all still alive tomorrow. Vivian moved through the darkness like she'd been born to it. Years of checking on livestock at night had taught her to walk quietly, to read shadows, to move without disturbing the world around her. She made it to the western edge of the lumberyard without being spotted. The stacks of cut timber rose like small buildings, organized into rows. Each stack represented months of work, thousands of dollars in value. All of it bone dry from the summer heat. All of it ready to burn. She pulled out the first bottle, struck a match against her boot. The rag caught immediately, flames dancing blue and orange. She threw it hard, watched it arc through the air and smash against the nearest stack. Fire spread like something alive, hungry and eager. Across the yard, she saw Silas's bottles exploding, more fire blossoming in the darkness. Shouts of alarm rang out as the guards realized what was happening. Men came running from the bunkhouses, some still pulling on their pants. Vivian lit her second bottle and threw it into a different stack, creating multiple points of fire. The third bottle she saved, backing toward the trees as the entire camp descended into chaos. Fire! We got fire! Get the water! Someone's sabotaging us. A guard spotted her, raised his rifle. Vivian dove behind a stack of lumber as bullets whined past her head, splintering wood. She came up firing, her Winchester barking 3 times. She didn't know if she hit him, didn't care, just kept moving, kept creating distance. Silas appeared beside her, his face streaked with ash. Time to go! They ran. Behind them, the timber yard was transforming into an inferno. The dry wood caught so fast it seemed impossible, flames climbing 30 feet high in minutes. Men screamed, horses panicked, the whole valley filled with smoke and terror. They reached the trees where the others waited, threw themselves onto their horses, and rode. Vivian looked back once and saw the entire camp outlined in fire, a beacon visible for miles. She'd done that. She'd crossed that line, and it felt right. They were 2 miles down the mountain when they heard the second explosion, this one from the south, from town. Pete's distraction. The warehouse going up in flames, pulling attention, creating confusion. Perfect timing. We need to split up, Silas said as they reached the main road. Crowe's going to have men everywhere once he realizes what happened. You and these folks head west, toward the Badlands. I'll go south, make him think we're heading for the border. Draw the pursuit away from you. No. Vivian surprised herself with the vehemence. We stay together. That's tactical stupidity. Maybe. But I'm not letting you sacrifice yourself for me. We do this together, or not at all. Silas looked like he wanted to argue, but Sarah interrupted. There's a place. Old mining settlement about 15 miles west. Been abandoned for years, but the buildings are still standing. We could hole up there, wait for things to cool down. Perfect, Vivian said before Silas could object. That's where we go. They rode hard through the night, pushing the horses to their limits. Behind them, Black Hollow was waking up to chaos. 2 fires, a crashed wagon full of prisoners, and a timber operation worth $20,000 burning to ash. Crowe would be furious, dangerous. Exactly what Vivian wanted. The mining settlement appeared just as dawn was breaking, a collection of wooden buildings weathered gray by time and neglect. They'd once housed hundreds of workers back when silver was flowing. Now they housed only ghosts and memories. Vivian dismounted, every muscle screaming. She'd been in the saddle for hours, running on nothing but anger and determination. Now that they'd stopped, exhaustion hit her like a physical blow. We rest here, she said. 2 hours. Then we figure out our next move. Our next move is to run, one of the rescued prisoners said. A middle-aged man whose name Vivian hadn't learned. Get as far from Crowe as possible. Run where? He owns half the territory. And once word spreads that we burned his operation, every lawman between here and the border will be looking for us. Vivian shook her head. No, running just means dying tired. We fight. With what? We've got maybe 3 rifles and a handful of ammunition? He's got 40 gunmen. He's got 40 gunmen who just watched their boss's timber yard burn down, who are starting to wonder if maybe Caleb Crowe isn't as untouchable as they thought. Vivian met each of their eyes in turn. Tonight we proved something. We proved that he can be hurt, that he bleeds. And more importantly, we proved that people are willing to fight back. That matters. She's right, Sarah said quietly. I've spent months trying to organize resistance in Black Hollow, talking to people, trying to get them to stand together. But they were all too afraid. Now they've seen what's possible. Some of them will still be too scared, but others will find their courage. Silas had been quiet through this whole exchange, but now he spoke up. Burning the timber yard was a good first step, but it's not enough. Crowe's going to retaliate, and when he does, it'll be brutal. We need to be ready, and we need to hit him again before he can recover. Keep him off balance. Hit him how? Vivian asked. His water rights. You said he's been buying them up, charging farmers for access to the river. What if we destroyed the dam he uses to control the flow? Open it up, let the water run free again. It'd cost him a fortune and win us allies among the farmers. That dam's heavily guarded, stone construction, built to last. We'd need explosives. I know where to get some. Mining camp north of here, abandoned like this place. They left equipment behind, including dynamite. It's probably unstable by now, but if we're careful... That's suicide, the middle-aged man said. You're talking about suicide. I'm talking about war, Silas corrected. And in war, you either fight or you die. There's no third option. They argued for another hour, voices rising and falling in the empty buildings. Some wanted to run, disappear into the wilderness and start over somewhere Crowe's reach didn't extend. Others wanted to keep fighting, to press the advantage while they had momentum. In the end, it was Vivian who made the decision. Anyone who wants to leave, leave now. I won't stop you, won't judge you. You've already risked more than anyone should have to. But I'm staying. I'm going after that dam, and I'm not stopping until Caleb Crowe is either dead or broken. So decide. Run or fight, but decide now. 3 of them chose to run. The middle-aged man and 2 others, people whose names Vivian still didn't know. She gave them supplies, pointed them west, and watched them disappear into the dawn. Part of her envied them. The part that was tired of being afraid, tired of fighting, but a bigger part, the part that had held Thomas's hand as he died, that had watched her children cry, that had stood in chains while a corrupt judge prepared to destroy her. That part wanted blood. So we're doing this, Sarah said. It wasn't a question. We're doing this, Vivian confirmed. Silas, how long to get that dynamite? Half a day there, half a day back. If I leave now, I can be back by nightfall. Then go. The rest of us will rest, tend wounds, prepare. When you get back, we plan the attack. Silas mounted his horse, then paused. Mrs. Mercer, what you did tonight, burning that timber yard, that took courage. But courage only gets you so far. At some point, you're going to have to decide how far you're willing to go, what lines you're willing to cross. And I need you to think about that now, before we're in the middle of it. Because once we destroy that dam, people are going to die. Maybe workers, maybe guards, maybe us. And there's no taking it back. I know. Do you? Because I've seen what happens when people cross lines they didn't think they could. Seen them break. And I need you steady, Mrs. Mercer. Need you strong. Can't do this if you're going to fall apart halfway through. Vivian walked over to him, looked up at his scarred face. My husband is dead because Caleb Crowe wanted our land. My children are orphans in everything but name. And last night I watched a woman die who I could have saved if I'd been faster, braver, better. So don't lecture me about crossing lines. I'm already so far over every line I can't even see them anymore. The only question is whether I'm going to make it mean something. Silas held her gaze for a long moment, then nodded. Good enough. I'll be back by dark. He rode out, and Vivian turned to face the remaining four. Sarah Chen. A young man named Jacob, who worked in the general store. A farmer's daughter called Rebecca, who couldn't have been more than 19. And a Chinese laborer named Wei, who spoke almost no English, but whose eyes burned with anger Vivian recognized. All right, she said, we've got 12 hours. Let's make them count. They spent the first hour tending wounds and checking ammunition. Rebecca had a gash across her arm from where the wagon had thrown her, deep enough to need stitches. Vivian did her best with needle and thread borrowed from Sarah's sewing kit, her hand steadier than she expected. The girl bit down on a leather strap and didn't make a sound, which was more than Vivian could say for most men she'd known. You're good at this, Sarah observed, watching Vivian work. Had to be. Ranch life doesn't leave room for weakness. You learn to set bones, stitch cuts, deliver calves at midnight, or you don't survive. Vivian tied off the final stitch and stepped back. That'll hold, but keep it clean. Infection out here kills as sure as a bullet. Rebecca examined the stitching, flexing her arm experimentally. My pa always said women from the East don't belong out here. Said they're too soft for frontier life. Your pa ever meet any women from the East? No, ma'am. Then maybe he should keep his opinions to himself. Vivian gathered up the bloody rags. You did good last night. Most people would have panicked. I was terrified. Terrified is fine. Terrified keeps you alert. It's when you stop being scared that you get careless and die. Jacob appeared in the doorway, his face pale. Mrs. Mercer, you need to see this. She followed him outside to where Wei was standing on the roof of one of the buildings, pointing south. Even without climbing up, Vivian could see what had caught their attention. Smoke. Thick black columns of it rising from multiple points across the valley. That's not just the timber yard, Sarah said, shading her eyes against the morning sun. That's too spread out. Vivian's stomach dropped. That's Black Hollow. He's burning the town. They scrambled up beside Wei, and from this vantage point the truth was unmistakable. Black Hollow was ablaze. Not the whole town, but enough of it. The warehouse Pete had set fire to as a distraction, yes, but also other buildings. The general store, the schoolhouse. Even from 15 miles away, Vivian could see figures moving through the streets, people running, trying to save what they could. Why would he burn his own town? Jacob's voice cracked. That's where his money comes from, his supplies. He's making a point, Vivian said quietly. Showing everyone what happens when you defy him. Pete set that first fire, so Crowe's burning everything Pete cared about. Everything any of them cared about. He's saying this is what rebellion costs. Sarah pressed a hand to her mouth. My school. All those books, the supplies we'd saved for... Gone. All of it gone. Because of what we did. The weight of it hit Vivian like a physical thing. She'd wanted to hurt Crowe, wanted to prove he could be fought. But she hadn't considered this. Hadn't thought about the innocent people who'd be caught in the crossfire. This isn't your fault, Jacob said, though he didn't sound convinced. Isn't it? I'm the one who burned the timber yard. I'm the one who started this. No. Wei spoke for the first time since they'd rescued him, his English heavily accented but clear. Crow started, years ago. You just first one brave enough to hit back. Not same thing. He was right, intellectually, but watching those smoke columns rise, knowing people were losing everything they'd built, Vivian felt the crushing weight of consequence. Every action rippled outward. Every choice created victims. We need to help them, Rebecca said. We can't just stand here and watch. We go back there. We're dead. Vivian forced herself to look away from the smoke. Crow will have men everywhere looking for us. And if we're captured, this ends. No more resistance, just a public hanging to remind everyone else what happens when you fight back. So we abandon them? We avenge them. When Silas gets back with that dynamite, we hit the dam. We cost Crow so much money, he can't afford to keep burning things down. We make the price of crushing us higher than he's willing to pay. Vivian turned to face them all. I know it's not enough. I know people are suffering right now, and we're not there. But sometimes the best thing you can do is survive long enough to make the enemy bleed. They stood in silence, watching Black Hollow burn. Vivian thought about Pete Walsh and wondered if he was still alive. Thought about all the people who'd congratulated her after the trial, who'd seen her as some kind of symbol. Were they regretting that now? Cursing her name as they watched their homes burn? Probably. Sarah broke the silence first. We should prepare defenses here in case Crow's men track us. At least make them work for it. It was good advice. They spent the next several hours turning the mining settlement into something defensible. Barricading doors, creating firing positions, stockpiling rocks that could be thrown if ammunition ran out. Wei proved surprisingly useful at this, his mining experience giving him an eye for structural weak points. He showed them how to undermine certain walls, create choke points, funnel any attackers into kill zones. You've done this before, Vivian observed as he worked. We nodded. In China. Before I come here. My village, we fight bandits. Lose. They kill many people. I run. Come to America thinking it'd be better. He gestured at the smoke still visible in the distance. Same everywhere. Strong people hurt weak people. Never changes. Maybe we can change it. Maybe. Or maybe we just die trying, but better than living on knees. It was almost noon when they heard horses approaching. Vivian grabbed her rifle, took position behind a wall, heart hammering. Too early for Silas to be back. Which meant it was either Crow's men or someone else entirely. 3 riders emerged from the tree line, moving cautiously. Vivian recognized one of them immediately, Pete Walsh, his face covered in soot, his shirt burned in places. The other 2 were strangers, but they had the hollow-eyed look of people who'd lost everything. Don't shoot, Pete called out. It's me, it's Pete. Vivian lowered her rifle and stepped into view. You're alive. Barely. Crow's men came for me after the warehouse went up. Would have killed me, but my neighbors hid me in their cellar. By morning, half the town was burning. He dismounted, his movement stiff. These are Tom and Alice Brennan. They ran a boarding house until about 6 hours ago. It's gone, Alice said flatly. Everything's gone. Crow's men came through with torches, said anyone caught helping the widow and her gang would burn. So they just started burning anyway, to make sure. Tom was staring at the ground, his hands clenched. 20 years. We built that place for 20 years, raised 3 kids there, and they burned it down in 10 minutes. I'm sorry, Vivian said, though the words felt inadequate. Sorry doesn't rebuild a house. Tom's voice was hard. Sorry doesn't bring back what's gone. But revenge might make it hurt less. So we came to find you. Pete said you're planning something, said you're going after Crow's dam. That's the plan, assuming we can get the explosives and don't all die in the attempt. Then we're in. Alice knows dynamite. Her father was a miner, and I can shoot. Not as good as I used to be, but good enough. They were gathering followers now, Vivian realized. Not an army, not even close. But people who'd been pushed too far, who'd finally reached the point where dying fighting seemed better than living in fear. It was something. Maybe even enough. Pete pulled her aside while the others were settling in. It's bad in town. Worse than you think. Crow's declared martial law, got his men patrolling the streets with rifles. Anyone out after dark gets shot on sight. He's saying you're a terrorist, that you're trying to destroy the whole territory, and people are believing him because they're scared and angry and need someone to blame. How many dead? 4 that I know of for sure, more injured, and about 30 families left homeless. The fire's still burning in some places. They can't get it under control. Pete rubbed his face. I thought I was helping, thought the distraction would give you time. Instead, I just gave Crowe an excuse to do what he's always wanted. He would have found an excuse anyway. Men like Crowe always do. Maybe. But I'm the one who lit that match. So I'm going to see this through, whatever it takes. That dam of his, when do we hit it? Tonight, assuming Silas makes it back with the dynamite. And if he doesn't, Vivian hadn't let herself consider that possibility. Then we figure something else out. We don't stop. Can't stop. Not now. The afternoon dragged on with agonizing slowness. They took turns keeping watch, sleeping in shifts, trying to conserve energy for what was coming. Vivian found she couldn't rest. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Black Hollow burning, saw Thomas's face, saw her children on that stage, pulling away into the dust. Sarah found her sitting on the roof of one of the buildings, staring at nothing. You should eat something, Sarah said, offering a piece of hardtack. Can't fight on an empty stomach. Not hungry. Eat anyway. Doctor's orders. You're not a doctor. No, but I'm the closest thing we have, so you'll listen to me or I'll tell everyone you're being difficult. Sarah sat down beside her. You're thinking about the people who died, the ones who lost their homes. Hard not to. It's not your fault. You know that, right? Crowe made the choice to burn those buildings, not you. I gave him the excuse. That's close enough. Vivian took the hardtack, chewed it mechanically. It tasted like sawdust. I keep thinking about this story my mother used to tell, about a woman who made a deal with something dark, traded her soul for revenge. And she got her revenge, but it cost her everything she loved, cost her her humanity, turned her into something hollow. That's just a story. Is it? Because right now I'm planning to blow up a dam, flood Crowe's operations, probably kill people in the process. And I don't feel bad about it. Don't feel much of anything except this cold determination to make him hurt. That's not normal, is it? That's not how people are supposed to be. Sarah was quiet for a moment. I think trauma changes us, makes us capable of things we never thought we could do. You've lost your husband, been separated from your children, watched your home and your life get destroyed. Of course you're different. Anyone would be. Different or broken. Maybe both, maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe what matters is what you do with it. They sat in silence, watching the sun track across the sky. Vivian thought about the woman she'd been a year ago, content, quiet, focused on small daily concerns. That woman was gone, dead and buried alongside Thomas. What remained was something harder, sharper, something forged in grief and rage. She wasn't sure if that was evolution or corruption. Silas returned just as the sun was setting, riding hard and leading a pack horse loaded with wooden crates. He looked exhausted, his face gray with dust, but there was satisfaction in his eyes. Got it, he announced, dismounting. 20 sticks of dynamite, fuses, blasting caps, enough to bring down that dam and half the mountain with it. Is it stable? Alice asked, moving to inspect the cargo. Mostly. Some of it's sweating, which means it's degrading, but if we're careful, it should do the job. Alice pried open one of the crates, examined the contents with a professional eye. This is old, really old. We use it wrong. We'll blow ourselves up before we ever reach the dam. Then we better not use it wrong. Silas looked around at their assembled group, taking in the new faces. We picked up some friends, I see. Vivian made introductions explaining what had happened in Black Hollow. She watched Silas's face darken as she described the fires, the deaths, the martial law. That's escalation, he said when she finished. Crowe's not just trying to scare you anymore. He's trying to provoke you into doing something stupid. Something that'll give him justification to wipe out everyone who's ever opposed him. Then we better make sure it's not stupid. Vivian gathered them all together. All right, here's what we know. The dam is 5 miles south of here, controls water access to 3 rivers. Crowe built it 5 years ago, charges farmers for water rights, threatens to cut off flow if they don't pay. It's guarded day and night, usually about 10 men, more since we hit the timber yard. Stone construction, 60 feet high, with a spillway on the eastern side. We can't just blow the whole thing, Alice interjected. That much water releasing at once would flood everything downstream, kill people who have nothing to do with this. So what do you suggest? We target the control gates. Blow those, the water flows free, but controlled. Dam stays intact, but Crowe loses the ability to regulate it. No more charging for access. And no flood. It was a better plan than Vivian had dared hope for. Can we do it with what we have? If I place the charges right, yes, but I'll need to get close, real close. And I'll need time to work without anyone shooting at me. We create a distraction, Silas said. Draw the guards away from the gates, give Alice time to set the charges. Then we blow them, retreat, and hope we're far enough away when it goes off. That's it? That's the plan? You got a better one, I'm listening. Otherwise, we work with what we have. They spent the next hour refining details, arguing over positions and timing. Tom wanted to be part of the assault team. Jacob insisted he could shoot well enough to be useful. Wade just sharpened his knife and waited, his face unreadable. Finally, as full darkness fell, Vivian stood. All right, we leave in 1 hour. Everyone check your weapons, your supplies. This goes wrong, we scatter. Don't try to be heroes. Just survive and regroup at the settlement. And if it goes right, Rebecca asked, then tomorrow Caleb Crowe wakes up to find his stranglehold on this territory broken. And maybe, just maybe, we all live long enough to see what happens next. They rode out under a moonless sky, the darkness so complete Vivian could barely see her own hands. 11 of them now, spread out in a loose column, moving as quietly as possible through terrain that wanted to kill them. The horses picked their way carefully over loose rocks, around gopher holes, through brush that grabbed at stirrups and snagged on clothing. Vivian's heart hammered the entire way. Every sound seemed magnified, hoofbeats, the creak of leather, someone's nervous breathing. They were committed now. No turning back. Either they succeeded or they died trying. The dam appeared as a darker shadow against the night, a massive wall of stone blocking a narrow canyon. Vivian could hear the water behind it, a low, constant rush that made her bones vibrate. Lights flickered at the top, guards on patrol, right where Silas had predicted. They stopped a quarter-mile out, tied the horses in a dense grove of pine. Silas gathered them close, his voice barely a whisper. Tom, Jacob, Rebecca, you're with me. We approach from the north, make noise, draw their attention. Pete, Way, Sarah, your backup. Stay in the trees, cover our retreat. Vivian, you're with Alice. Get her to those gates, protect her while she works. Once the charges are set, you signal and we all run like hell. Questions? Yeah, Tom said. What if they've got more than 10 men? Then we improvise badly and hope we're lucky. Let's move. They split up, Vivian and Alice breaking off to circle around to the eastern side of the dam. The approach was treacherous, all loose scree and steep drops. Alice moved with surprising confidence, her pack of explosives balanced carefully on her back. She'd done this before, Vivian realized. Not just handled dynamite, but done it in dangerous situations where one mistake meant death. They were halfway to the spillway when the shooting started. Silas and his group had made contact with the guards, and the night exploded into muzzle flashes and shouts. Vivian heard Silas's voice, deliberately loud, taunting the guards, heard return fire, the distinctive crack of rifles. The distraction was working. Go, Vivian hissed, and they ran. The control gates were set into the stone face of the dam, massive iron wheels that regulated water flow. Alice went to work immediately, unpacking her supplies with practiced efficiency. Vivian took position beside her, rifle ready, scanning for threats. How long? Vivian asked. 10 minutes. Maybe less if I rush, but rushing gets us blown up. Alice was already placing charges, wrapping them around the gate mechanisms. Keep them off me and we'll be fine. The shooting intensified. Someone screamed. Whether friend or enemy, Vivian couldn't tell. She wanted to look, to see if everyone was okay, but she forced herself to stay focused on their immediate surroundings. Her job was to protect Alice. Nothing else mattered. A guard appeared above them, on the top of the dam, raising a rifle. Vivian fired first, her shot going wide but close enough to make him duck. She worked the lever, fired again, and this time he went down. She didn't know if she'd killed him, didn't have time to think about it. Contact left, Alice shouted, not looking up from her work. Vivian spun and saw 2 more guards coming around the base of the dam. She dropped to one knee, aimed carefully, squeezed the trigger. The first guard fell. The second dove behind a boulder and started returning fire, bullets sparking off the stone around them. How long? Vivian shouted over the gunfire. 5 minutes. Maybe 4. It felt like an eternity. Vivian kept firing, trying to keep the remaining guard pinned. Her ammunition was running low. She'd brought 20 rounds and had maybe 6 left. Behind her, she could hear Alice working, muttering to herself in a steady stream of technical language. More guards were coming now, drawn by the shooting. The distraction was failing. Silas's group was either dead or retreating, and Vivian and Alice were about to be overrun. "We need to go," Vivian said. "Now. Not done yet. Just need to connect the fuses and—" A bullet hit the rock next to Alice's head, showering them both with stone fragments. Alice jerked back, and Vivian saw blood running down her face. "Alice, I'm fine. Just keep them off me." Vivian emptied her rifle at the approaching guards, then drew Thomas's old revolver from her belt. 6 shots left in the world, and at least 8 men coming for them. The math didn't work. They were going to die here. Then Way appeared out of nowhere, his knife red to the hilt, 3 guards down behind him. He took position beside Vivian without a word, and together they held the line while Alice finished her work. "Done!" Alice shouted. "Fuse is lit! We have maybe 90 seconds!" They ran. Way grabbed Alice when she stumbled, half carried her away from the dam. Vivian covered their retreat, firing blindly behind them, not caring if she hit anything, just buying seconds, buying distance. They'd made it maybe 50 yards when the charges blew. The explosion was smaller than Vivian had expected, more of a sharp crack than a boom. But the effect was immediate. She heard metal shrieking, heard the massive control gates tearing free from their housings. And then came the water. It started as a trickle, then a stream, then a roaring flood as tons of pent-up pressure found release. The gates blew completely off the dam face, tumbling down the canyon in a chaos of twisted iron and spray. Water followed, not the catastrophic flood Alice had warned against, but a controlled release that would run for days, maybe weeks, until the reservoir behind the dam equalized. Crowe's water monopoly broken in 90 seconds. They regrouped at the horses, everyone appearing out of the darkness bloodied but alive. Tom had taken a bullet in the shoulder, but it had gone through clean. Rebecca was limping from a twisted ankle, but they were alive, all of them, against all odds. "We did it," Jacob said, almost disbelieving. "We actually did it." "Don't celebrate yet," Silas warned. "That explosion's going to draw every man Crowe has. We need distance before sunrise." They rode hard through the remaining night, pushing the horses to the edge of collapse. Behind them, they could hear activity, shouts, more gunfire, the organized chaos of Crowe's men responding to yet another attack. But by the time dawn broke, they were 20 miles away, hidden in a box canyon Silas knew from his scouting. Vivian dismounted and immediately collapsed against a rock, every muscle trembling. She'd been running on pure adrenaline, and now that it was fading, the cost hit her. She hurt everywhere. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold her canteen. Sarah knelt beside her, checking her over for injuries. "You're in shock. Here, drink this slowly." "I killed someone tonight." Vivian's voice sounded distant to her own ears. "Maybe more than one. I saw them fall." "I know. Doesn't that bother you, that I took lives?" "It bothers me that you had to. But no, the fact that you did it to protect us, to protect yourself, that doesn't bother me at all." Sarah pressed the canteen into Vivian's hands. "Drink, rest. We'll talk about morality and consequences later. Right now you need to not die of exhaustion." Vivian drank, the water tasting like metal and dust. Around her, the others were tending to their own wounds, sharing what little food remained, trying to process what they'd done. They'd blown up a dam, destroyed Crowe's control over the water supply. It was an act of terrorism by any definition, an act of war. And Vivian felt nothing but a hollow satisfaction that it had worked. Silas sat down beside her, his own face a mask of exhaustion. "You did good tonight. Better than good. Most people would have panicked when those guards came. You stayed calm." "I didn't feel calm. Calm's not about feeling. It's about action. You acted right, and we're all alive because of it." He pulled out his revolver, started methodically cleaning it. "Tomorrow, Crowe's going to come for us with everything he has. He can't let this stand. Can't let a bunch of farmers and shopkeepers humiliate him twice. So we need to be ready." "Ready how?" "We're out of ammunition, out of dynamite, out of everything except pure spite. Spite's more powerful than you think, especially when other people start feeling it too." Silas gestured at their group. "Look at them. 3 days ago, these were ordinary people. Now they're warriors, tired, scared, probably traumatized warriors, but warriors nonetheless. And word's going to spread. About the timber yard, about the dam, about everything. People are going to hear that Caleb Crowe can be beaten. And some of them, maybe not many, but some, are going to decide to fight back too. Or they're going to decide we're dangerous lunatics and help Crowe hunt us down. That's also possible. War's messy like that. They lapsed into silence, watching the sun rise over the canyon walls. Somewhere out there, Black Hollow was waking up to find its water running free for the first time in 5 years. Farmers would discover they could irrigate without paying Crowe's extortion fees. Ranchers would find their cattle had access to the river again. Small victories in the grand scheme of things, but victories nonetheless. Alice approached, her head bandaged where the rock fragment had cut her. I've been thinking about our next move. We've hit his timber and his water, but his real power comes from his cattle operation. That's where the majority of his money is. You suggesting we stampede his herd? Tom asked. I'm suggesting we steal it, or at least as much as we can move. Drive them north, sell them in Denver. Use the money to fund actual resistance. Buy real weapons. Hire actual fighters. Turn this from a guerrilla operation into something organized. It was ambitious, possibly insane, but the more Vivian thought about it, the more sense it made. They couldn't keep doing this, striking and running, always one step ahead of disaster. Eventually their luck would run out. They needed resources, structure, a real plan beyond just herding Crowe until he gave up. How many cattle are we talking about? Vivian asked. His main herd is about 3,000 head, kept in the valley east of his compound. Guarded, but not as heavily as other assets. If we moved fast, hit them during a shift change, we could maybe get away with 500 head before anyone responded. 500 cattle. Silas laughed, but there was no humor in it. That's not a raid, that's an exodus. We'd need drovers, chuck wagons, remuda horses, and we'd be moving slow, easy to track. Crowe would run us down in a day. Unless we had help, Sarah said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. There are other ranchers in this territory, other people Crowe's squeezed. What if we reached out to them, offered them a share of the cattle in exchange for helping with the drive? They'd never go for it, Tom said. Too risky. Is it? We just proved Crowe can be hurt, proved he's not invincible. Some of them might be ready to take that risk. Sarah looked at Vivian. You were one of them once, a rancher just trying to live your life. What would have convinced you to join something like this? Vivian thought about it, thought about those long months after Thomas died, watching Crowe's grip tighten, feeling helpless and alone. Proof that fighting back was possible, and proof that I wouldn't be alone. Then that's what we give them. We show them what we've done, show them we're organized and serious, and we offer them a chance to be part of something bigger than just surviving. It was a gamble. Everything they'd done so far had been reactive, desperate moves made by desperate people. This would be different. This would be deliberate, planned, an actual strategy. It terrified Vivian more than the violence had. All right, she heard herself say. We try. Reach out to the ranchers, see who's willing to stand with us. But we do it carefully. One wrong person, one informant, and Crowe wipes us out before we can even start. I can help with that, Pete said. I know most of the ranchers within 50 miles. Delivered supplies to them for years. I know who hates Crowe and who's too scared to move. Give me 2 days. I can sound them out, see who's interested. 2 days. Vivian looked at their exhausted group. We can't stay here that long. Crowe will find us. Then we split up, Silas suggested. Pete goes to recruit. The rest of us keep moving, stay ahead of Crowe's search parties. We meet up in 3 days at… where? Where's a good rally point? Redstone Canyon, Alice said. 30 miles north. Plenty of cover, multiple escape routes, water source. My father used to prospect there. Redstone Canyon it is, 3 days. And if Pete can't recruit anyone, we improvise. Again. They spent the rest of the day resting, preparing for the next phase. Vivian cleaned her weapons, counted ammunition, tried not to think about how few bullets remained. They were running on fumes now, kept alive by nothing but momentum and Crowe's apparent inability to predict their next move. That couldn't last forever. As evening approached, Pete prepared to leave. He'd changed into clean clothes borrowed from Tom, washed his face, tried to look like a respectable merchant instead of a terrorist. It was a thin disguise, but it might work long enough to make contact with the ranchers. Be careful, Vivian told him. Crowe's men will be everywhere. I've been careful my whole life. Look where it got me. Maybe it's time to try something different. Pete swung into his saddle. 3 days, Redstone Canyon. I'll bring an army or die trying. He rode out, and Vivian watched until he disappeared into the gathering darkness. Another person whose life she'd altered, whose fate now depended on decisions she'd made. The weight of it was crushing. You can't save everyone, Silas said, reading her thoughts. Can't protect everyone. All you can do is give them a choice and hope they choose right. What if they choose wrong? Then they die. Or we die. Or we all die together in a blaze of glory that gets sung about for years. He smiled grimly. Welcome to Revolution, Mrs. Mercer. It's exactly as terrible as advertised. They broke camp at midnight, moving under cover of darkness. The landscape was harsh and unforgiving, all sharp rocks and steep grades. Way led the way, his mining experience somehow translating into an uncanny ability to find safe paths through treacherous terrain. They made good time, covering 15 miles before dawn forced them to find shelter. The next 2 days blurred together into a haze of exhaustion and paranoia. They saw Crowe's men twice, distant riders on patrol, searching. Both times they hid, barely breathing, until the threat passed. Vivian's nerves were stretched so thin she jumped at every sound, saw threats in every shadow. On the 3rd day, they reached Redstone Canyon just as the sun was setting. It was exactly as Alice had described. A deep gorge with red sandstone walls, multiple ravines branching off, and a clear stream running through the center. Defensible. Hidden. Perfect. They'd been there maybe an hour when Pete rode in with 30 men behind him. 30 ranchers, farmers, and miners. All armed, all grim-faced, all ready to fight. Vivian stared at them in disbelief. Told you I'd bring an army, Pete said, dismounting. Wasn't sure I believed it myself until they all actually showed up. The ranchers gathered around, introducing themselves. Names Vivian recognized from Thomas's stories. The Hendersons who ran cattle in the Northern Valley, the Yamamotos who'd been growing wheat for 20 years, the Murphy brothers who worked a silver claim. All of them with grievances against Crowe. All of them tired of being afraid. So it's true, Old Man Henderson asked. You really blew up his dam. Control gates, Alice corrected. But yes, water's flowing free now, no more tolls. And the timber yard? That was you too? That was us. Vivian stepped forward. We hit him where it hurts, made him bleed, proved he's not untouchable. But we can't do this alone. We need help. We need people willing to stand up and fight back. Fight how? One of the Yamamotos asked. We're farmers, not gunfighters. Most of us can barely shoot. Then we teach you. We organize. We stop reacting to Crowe and start forcing him to react to us. Vivian looked at each of them in turn. I won't lie to you. This is dangerous. Some of you might die. Probably will die. But I'd rather die fighting than spend another day living under Caleb Crowe's boot. So I'm asking, are you with us? The silence stretched out. Vivian held her breath, waiting for them to leave, to reject this crazy plan, to go back to their safe lives of quiet oppression. Then Henderson spoke. My son's buried in the town cemetery. Died 5 years ago when Crowe's men ran him off the road. Sheriff ruled it an accident. Wouldn't even investigate. He pulled out a rifle, checked the action. I'm in. My family lost our home 2 years ago, Mrs. Henderson added. Had to start over from nothing. I'm in. One by one, they pledged their support. Not all 35 of them left, unwilling to take the risk. But 25 stayed. 25 people ready to go to war. It wasn't an army, but it was a start. They spent the evening planning, arguing, figuring out how to actually steal 3,000 head of cattle from the most powerful man in the territory. It should have been impossible, probably was impossible, but Vivian found herself believing they could do it anyway because the alternative was giving up. And she was done giving up. The plan they hammered out over the next 12 hours was equal parts brilliance and desperation. Crowe's main herd grazed in the eastern valley, watched over by rotating crews of drovers who also served as his eyes and ears. The cattle were branded, documented, worth a fortune. Stealing even a fraction of them would require precision, speed, and more luck than Vivian felt comfortable relying on. The shift change happens at dawn, Henderson explained, sketching in the dirt with a stick. Old crews tired, new crews still waking up, There's maybe 15 minutes where nobody's paying full attention. That's our window. 15 minutes to move 500 head? One of the Murphy brothers shook his head. That's impossible. Cattle don't move that fast, especially not in the dark. We don't move them in the dark. We prepare them. Alice leaned forward, her bandaged head catching the firelight. We go in the night before, cut sections of fence, create channels. When dawn comes, we just have to spook them in the right direction. They'll move themselves. Spook them how? Sarah asked. Gunshots, fire, whatever works. Cattle are herd animals. Once a few start running, the rest follow. We just have to make sure they run north instead of south. Silas had been quiet through most of this, studying Henderson's crude map. Now he spoke up. Crowe's compound is 5 miles south of the grazing valley. Even if we pull this off, he'll hear the commotion. He'll come with everything he's got. So we need a rear guard, people willing to slow him down while the main group drives the cattle north. That's a death sentence, Tom said flatly. It's a delaying action. Big difference. We don't stand and fight. We harass, retreat, harass again. Buy time. If we do it right, everyone makes it out alive. And if we do it wrong, then some of us don't. But that's true of every part of this plan. Silas looked around at their assembled group. I'm not going to lie and say this is safe. It's not. It's probably the most dangerous thing any of us will ever do. But it's also our best shot at actually hurting Crowe in a way he can't recover from. 500 head represents months of income. That kind of loss, combined with the timber yard and the dam, might finally get the territorial government to pay attention. Or it might just get us all hanged, Pete muttered. That's also possible. So everyone who wants to walk away, now's the time. No judgment, no hard feelings. Just take your horse and go. Nobody moved. Vivian watched their faces, saw fear and determination in equal measure. These weren't heroes. They were ordinary people who'd been pushed too far and were finally pushing back. Some of them would probably die. Hell, most of them might die. But they were choosing to be here anyway, which was its own kind of courage. All right then, Vivian said. We've got 2 days to prepare. Let's not waste them. Those 2 days were a blur of activity. They divided into groups, each with specific tasks. Henderson and his sons would scout the grazing valley, identify the best cattle to take, and the easiest routes north. The Yamamotos would handle logistics, food, water, supplies for a week-long drive. Way and Jacob would prepare the diversions, anything that could create noise, fire, or chaos. And Vivian would lead the group that actually entered the valley, that cut the fences and positioned themselves to move the herd. Silas insisted on training everyone who didn't know how to fight. He set up a makeshift firing range in a ravine where the sound wouldn't carry, taught them the basics. How to aim, how to breathe, how to not panic when bullets started flying. Most of them were terrible shots, but a few showed promise. Rebecca in particular had a steady hand and good instincts, hitting targets Vivian would have missed. You're a natural, Silas told her after she'd knocked down 5 bottles in a row. My pa taught me to hunt, said a woman needed to be able to feed herself, especially out here. Rebecca reloaded, her movements confident. He was right about that. Wrong about almost everything else, but right about that. Sarah worked with the injured, making sure everyone was physically capable of what was coming. Tom's shoulder wound had developed an infection, and for a day they thought they'd have to leave him behind. But Sarah drained it, packed it with herbs she'd found growing near the stream, and somehow kept him functional. Alice's head wound was healing cleanly, though she complained of headaches that made precision work difficult. I can still blow things up, she insisted when Vivian suggested she sit this one out. Just maybe not as accurately. That's not reassuring. Then be less reassured. I'm coming anyway. On the evening before the raid, Vivian found herself unable to sleep. She climbed to the rim of the canyon and sat watching the stars, thinking about Emily and Samuel. They'd be in Denver by now, safe with her sister. Did they think about her? Wonder if she was still alive? Or had they already started to forget, the way children do when trauma becomes too much to process? You're thinking about your kids. Silas appeared beside her, moving quiet as always. I can tell by the look on your face. I keep wondering if I'll ever see them again, if this is all worth it. Worth is a strange calculation. Is revenge worth orphaning your children? Is justice worth dying for? I don't know the answer to those questions. Not sure anyone does. He sat down, his movements stiff. My daughter would be 12 now if she'd lived. Sometimes I try to imagine what she'd look like, who she'd be, but I can't. All I can remember is her at 7 asking me why bad people got to win. What did you tell her? That they didn't, that good people just had to fight harder. He laughed bitterly. She died 3 days later. So much for my wisdom. They sat in silence for a while, two broken people trying to make sense of a broken world. Finally, Vivian spoke. After this, after we steal the cattle, after we've hurt Crowe as much as we can, what then? Then we keep fighting until one of us is dead. There's no other ending to this story. You know that, right? I know. And you're okay with it? Vivian thought about Thomas, about the life they'd built, about the future they'd planned. All of it gone now, ashes and memory. I'm not okay with any of this, but I'm done pretending there's a peaceful solution. Men like Crowe don't negotiate. They just take until someone stops them. So we stop him. Or die trying. Those are the only options left, Silas agreed. They descended back into the canyon as the first hints of dawn touched the eastern sky. The camp was already stirring, people preparing for the day ahead. Nervous energy crackled through the air, that peculiar tension that comes before violence. Everyone felt it, moved through it, tried to hold themselves together. Henderson gathered them all for a final briefing. My boys have been watching the valley for 2 days. Guards change at dawn, like I said, but there's something else. Crowe's pulled back most of his patrols. Everything's concentrated around his compound in Black Hollow. It's like he's expecting us to come to him. He probably is, Silas said. After the dam, he knows we're organized, knows we're not just going to disappear, so he's fortifying his position, making himself a hard target, which means he's left other things vulnerable. Or it's a trap. Could be. But we're committed now. We turn back, we lose momentum, people start doubting. The resistance falls apart before it's really started. Silas looked at Vivian. Your call. You're the one they're following. You say go, we go. You say stop, we stop. Every eye turned to her. Vivian felt the weight of it, all those lives depending on her decision. She thought about her children, safe in Denver. Thought about Thomas, cold in the ground. Thought about every person Crowe had hurt, every family he'd destroyed. We go, she said. Tonight. We take his cattle, his money, his sense of control. We show him that he can't hide behind walls and bought lawmen. We show everyone that Caleb Crowe can be beaten. The murmur of agreement was subdued but determined. They spent the day in final preparations, checking weapons, reviewing the plan, trying to eat despite stomachs twisted with anxiety. Vivian forced down some jerky and hardtack, knowing she'd need the energy. Her hand shook slightly as she cleaned her rifle for the 3rd time, checking each mechanism, each round in the magazine. Sarah caught her hand. You're going to wear the metal down if you keep at it. Need something to do with my hands. Then help me with the medical supplies. I'm preparing kits for each group, just basic stuff, bandages, whiskey, needle, and thread. But if someone gets shot, having supplies close might save their life. Vivian helped, grateful for the distraction. They assembled 10 small kits, packed them into oilskin pouches that could survive anything short of complete immersion. It was sobering work, a concrete acknowledgement that people were going to get hurt, maybe killed. I'm scared, Sarah admitted as they worked. I've never been this scared in my life. Good. Fear keeps you alive. Does it? Because right now it just makes me want to run very far away and never look back. But you're not running. No, because if I run now, I'll be running forever. And I'm tired of being afraid. Sarah tied off the last kit. When I was teaching, I had this student, sweet girl, bright as anything. Her father owed Crowe money, couldn't pay. So Crowe took the girl, sold her to a brothel in Santa Fe to cover the debt. She was 14 years old. Vivian felt sick. What happened to her? No idea. Probably nothing good. And that's just one story out of hundreds. So yeah, I'm terrified. But I'm more angry than I am scared. And anger's a better motivator than fear. They moved out 2 hours before sunset, wanting to be in position before darkness fell. The ride to the grazing valley took 3 hours, moving slowly to avoid detection. They split into their assigned groups at a designated point, Henderson taking his people to the north fence line, Way and Jacob heading to create diversions, Silas and his rear guard positioning themselves between the valley and Crowe's compound. Vivian's group was the largest, 12 people including herself, Sarah, Alice, and Pete. Their job was to enter the valley, cut the fences in strategic locations, and positioned themselves to spook the cattle north when the time came. It was dangerous work, close to the guards, close to disaster. They reached the valley as the sun was setting, painting everything in shades of red and gold. The cattle were dark shapes against the grass, hundreds of them grazing peacefully. Guards sat around small fires, eating dinner, talking in low voices. Just men doing a job, unaware that their world was about to explode. Vivian felt a twinge of guilt. These weren't Crowe's personal gunmen, weren't the ones who'd killed Thomas or burned Black Hollow. They were just workers, probably hated their boss as much as anyone. But they were standing between Vivian and her goal, which made them enemies by default. "Remember," she whispered to her group as they crept closer, "we don't shoot unless we have to. We're thieves tonight, not killers. We get in, cut the fences, get out, silent as ghosts." They nodded and dispersed, each person heading to their assigned section. Vivian and Pete took the eastern fence, the most exposed position, but also the most crucial. This was the main channel they'd funnel the cattle through. If they failed here, the whole operation collapsed. The fence was simple barbed wire strung between posts, easy to cut, but the sound of wire snapping carried in the still evening air. Vivian used her knife carefully, slicing through each strand with deliberate slowness. Beside her, Pete did the same. It took 20 minutes to clear a section wide enough for cattle to pass through. 20 minutes of barely breathing, of freezing every time a guard coughed or shifted position. They'd just finished when they heard voices approaching. 2 guards, walking the perimeter, talking about nothing important. Vivian and Pete pressed themselves flat against the ground, hidden in the tall grass. The guards passed within 10 feet, close enough that Vivian could smell tobacco smoke, hear one of them complaining about his pay. "Crowe's got money for fancy parties, but can't pay us a fair wage," the guard was saying. "I'm about ready to quit, find work somewhere else." "Good luck with that. He owns most of the jobs in this territory. You quit him, you starve." "Then maybe it's time to leave the territory. Head to California, find something better." "Maybe." They moved on, and Vivian slowly released the breath she'd been holding. That was too close. Her heart hammered so hard she was sure the guards could hear it. But they hadn't, and now the fence was cut. One objective down. She signaled Pete, and they crept back to the rendezvous point, where the others were gathering. Everyone had succeeded in their tasks. 6 sections of fence now lay open, creating multiple channels all leading north. When the stampede started, the cattle would have clear paths to run. Now, they just had to wait for dawn. The night dragged on with agonizing slowness. They took turns sleeping in shifts, always keeping someone on watch. Vivian tried to rest, but her mind wouldn't quiet. She kept running through the plan, finding flaws, imagining disasters. What if the cattle didn't spook? What if they ran the wrong direction? What if Crowe had positioned men they hadn't seen? What if... Finally, after an eternity, the sky began to lighten in the east. Dawn was coming. The guards would be changing soon. Their window of opportunity was opening. Vivian gathered her people. "Remember the plan. We wait for Henderson's signal, then we hit the fires and start shooting. Make noise, create chaos, get those cattle running. Then we follow them north, keep them moving. Don't stop for anything. Don't look back. Just ride." "What if someone falls behind?" one of the younger men asked. "Then they catch up on their own. We can't stop for stragglers." "I know that sounds harsh, but if we stop, we all die. So you keep moving no matter what. Understood?" They understood. Didn't like it, but understood. The sky grew lighter. In the valley below, Vivian saw movement at the guard camp, the night shift stirring, preparing to hand off to the day crew. Any minute now. Then Henderson's signal came, a hawk cry, perfectly mimicked, cutting through the morning air. Vivian took a breath and lit the first fire. It was a small thing, just dried grass and kindling arranged around the valley's edge. But in the pre-dawn darkness, it blazed bright, and more fires were springing up as the others lit theirs. 12 points of flame surrounding the herd, reflected in thousands of bovine eyes. The cattle stirred, nervous. The guards shouted, confused, trying to understand what was happening. And then Vivian raised her rifle and fired into the air. The sound was like a thunderclap. Every other rifle in her group fired too, a ragged volley that echoed off the valley walls. The cattle exploded into motion, bellowing and running. Not all of them ran north, some scattered in random directions, panicked. But the majority saw the open fence sections and poured through them, a river of beef and panic flowing exactly where Vivian wanted. "Ride!" she screamed, and they rode. The stampede was chaos incarnate. Dust filled the air, thick enough to choke on. The sound was overwhelming. Hooves, bellowing, more gunshots as the guards finally organized a response. Vivian rode at the edge of the herd, firing her rifle to keep them moving, to prevent them from turning. Around her, the others did the same. A guard appeared in front of her, his rifle raised. Vivian didn't hesitate, just aimed and fired. He went down and she rode past without looking back. No time for guilt. No time for anything except survival. They drove the cattle for an hour, pushing them hard, before Henderson signaled them to slow down. They'd covered maybe 8 miles, and the herd was starting to calm. Behind them, she could hear sporadic gunfire. Silas and the rear guard engaging Crowe's men, buying them time. "How many did we get?" Pete gasped, his face covered in dust and sweat. Henderson did a rough count. "Maybe 400 head, close to 5. We actually did it." They'd actually done it. Stolen 1,000 cattle from the most powerful man in the territory. Felt surreal, impossible, but the evidence was right in front of them. A massive herd spreading across the landscape. "Don't celebrate yet," Vivian warned. "Crowe's coming. We need to keep moving. Put as much distance between us and him as possible." They organized into a proper cattle drive, people positioned around the herd to keep them moving and contained. It was exhausting work, requiring constant attention. But it was also familiar. Most of these people had been ranching their whole lives. They knew how to handle cattle, even in less than ideal circumstances. By midday, they'd covered another 15 miles. Vivian called a halt to let the animals rest and drink at a stream. While the cattle recovered, she took stock of her people. Everyone had made it so far, though several were injured. Minor wounds mostly, cuts, bruises, one possible broken wrist from a fall. Nothing life-threatening. But there was no sign of Silas or the rear guard. "They should have caught up by now," Sarah said, voicing what everyone was thinking. "It's been 4 hours. They're probably fine, just being cautious, making sure they're not followed." Vivian tried to sound confident, but worry gnawed at her gut. 4 hours was too long. Something had gone wrong. "We should wait for them," Rebecca suggested. "We can't. Every minute we're stopped, Crowe gets closer. We have to keep moving." But no buts. We keep moving. That's what Silas would want. They pushed the herd north for the rest of the day, stopping only when darkness made travel impossible. They'd covered maybe 30 miles total, which meant they were still at least 4 days from Denver where they could sell the cattle. 4 days of exposure, of vulnerability. 4 days for Crowe to catch them. That night, Vivian allowed herself 2 hours of sleep. When she woke, it was to the sound of approaching horses. She grabbed her rifle, heart racing, but it was Silas and the rear guard, or what remained of them. Only 5 returned out of the original 10. Silas looked like he'd been through a war. His clothes were torn and bloody, his face bruised. He dismounted stiffly, favoring his left leg. "Where are the others?" Vivian asked, though she already knew. "Dead. 3 for sure, 2 captured. Crowe's men hit us hard, harder than I expected. We held them off for maybe 2 hours, but they just kept coming. Eventually, we had to break and run." He sat down heavily. "Jackson didn't make it. Neither did the Ortega brothers. Frank and Willie were surrounded, couldn't break free. Crowe has them now." The news hit like a punch. 5 men dead or captured because of her plan, her decisions. Vivian felt the weight of it settle on her shoulders, heavy as stone. "It's not your fault," Silas said, reading her face. "They knew the risks. They chose to be there. Doesn't make them less dead." "No, it doesn't. But we can't stop now. They bought us time with their lives. We need to make that mean something." They pushed harder the next day, driving the herd until the cattle were stumbling with exhaustion. Behind them, dust clouds appeared on the horizon. Crowe's men getting closer. They were being hunted now, and the hunters were gaining ground. On the 3rd day, they lost 12 head when a group of cattle broke away during a river crossing. On the 4th day, they lost 30 more to exhaustion and injury. The herd was weakening, and so were the people driving it. They were running out of food, water, and most importantly, time. "We're not going to make it to Denver," Henderson said that evening, his voice flat. "Crowe's going to catch us tomorrow, maybe the day after. We're too slow, too exposed." "Then we find another buyer," Alice suggested. "Somewhere closer. There's got to be ranchers or meat packers who'd take these cattle." "At what price?" "We need this money, need it to fund the resistance, to buy weapons, to actually have a chance at—" We need to be alive, Vivian interrupted. Henderson's right. We're not going to make Denver, so we sell local, take what we can get, and scatter. It's not the outcome we wanted, but it's better than dying. There's a rancher about 20 miles east, one of the Yamamotos spoke up. Carson Wells, he's honest, fair, pays in gold. If we can get the herd to him, he might take them. Might? He's not fond of Crowe, but he's also not fond of trouble. We'd have to convince him. It was their best option, possibly their only option. They changed course, driving the herd east toward Carson Wells's ranch. The cattle protested the change in direction, tired and confused. Several more broke away during the shift, reducing their number to maybe 350 head. They reached the Wells ranch just before dawn on the 5th day, exhausted and desperate. The ranch was substantial, a large house, multiple barns, corrals that could hold their herd. Carson Wells himself emerged as they approached, a gray-haired man with suspicious eyes and a rifle across his knees. "Mrs. Mercer," he said, recognizing her. "Heard you'd gone outlaw. Didn't quite believe it until now. Mr. Wells, I have cattle to sell, 350 head, all prime stock. I'll give you a fair price." These wouldn't happen to be Caleb Crowe's cattle, would they? There was no point lying. They would. Then you're asking me to buy stolen goods, asking me to put myself between you and the most dangerous man in the territory. Why would I do that? Because Crowe's been squeezing everyone, including you. Because these cattle are worth a fortune and I'm desperate enough to sell them cheap. And because helping us hurts Crowe, which I'm guessing you wouldn't mind too much. Wells studied her for a long moment. "What's your price?" $15 a head. That's half what they're worth, and you know it. It's also twice what I should pay for stolen cattle. But he was considering it. She could see him doing the math, weighing risk against reward. "Crowe comes for me, wants to know where you went. What do I tell him?" "Tell him the truth. That we sold you stolen cattle at gunpoint, that you had no choice. I'll even tie you up if it makes the story more convincing." Wells actually smiled at that. "You've got nerve, I'll give you that. All right, $15 a head. But I want you gone by noon. Don't care where you go. Just want you off my property before Crowe arrives." They had a deal. Wells's hands helped them move the cattle into the corrals, started the process of rebranding. Wells himself counted out gold coins, stacking them in neat piles. $5,250. It was less than Vivian had hoped for, but more than enough to fund their resistance for months. She divided the money among the group, keeping only what they needed for supplies and weapons. The ranchers who'd helped with the drive took their shares and scattered, heading back to their homes or to new territories where Crowe's reach didn't extend. Within 2 hours, their small army had dissolved back into individuals. Only the core group remained: Vivian, Silas, Sarah, Pete, Alice, Way, and a handful of others who had nowhere else to go. They stood in Wells's yard, dusty and exhausted, looking at each other and realizing they'd somehow survived. "What now?" Sarah asked. "Now we regroup," Vivian said. "Find a safe place to rest, tend wounds, plan the next move. Because this isn't over. We hurt Crowe, but we didn't break him. He's going to come for us with everything he has." "Let him come," Pete said. "We've proven we can fight. We've proven we can win." "We've proven we can survive," Silas corrected. "Winning's something else entirely. But yeah, let him come. At least now we've got resources to fight back with." They rode out as noon approached, leaving Wells to his implausible story. Vivian looked back once and saw him already tying himself up, creating the evidence of coercion. He was a smart man, careful. He'd probably survive Crowe's wrath. She hoped so anyway. They rode north for 3 days, constantly moving, constantly watching for pursuit. But Crowe's men never appeared. It was almost worse than being chased, the uncertainty, the not knowing. Finally, they reached an abandoned homestead that Silas knew, a place that had been empty for years. It was defensible, had water, and most importantly was far enough from civilization that nobody would accidentally stumble across them. They spent a week there, recovering. Sarah treated wounds that had gone too long without proper attention. Alice's headaches finally faded. Silas's leg healed enough that he could walk without limping. Even Vivian felt herself recovering, the exhaustion slowly lifting. But the guilt didn't fade. 5 men dead, 2 captured. Innocent people in Black Hollow losing their homes. all because she'd decided to fight back instead of just running away. "You did what you had to do," Sarah told her one evening. "Sometimes there are no good choices, just less terrible ones. And if I made the wrong choice, if all those people died for nothing?" "They didn't die for nothing. They died fighting for something they believed in. That's more than most people get." It wasn't enough. Would never be enough. But it was all Vivian had. On the 8th day, Way came running into the camp, his face urgent. Riders coming from the south, maybe 20 of them. Everyone scrambled for weapons, took defensive positions. Vivian's heart hammered as she watched the riders approach. This was it. Crowe had found them. They'd make their stand here, probably die here. But as the riders got closer, Vivian recognized the lead horse. It was Dutch Keller, Crowe's foreman. The man who'd delivered the invitation to that gathering weeks ago, and he was riding under a white flag. "Hold fire," Vivian called out. "Let's hear what he has to say." Dutch reined up 50 yards out, keeping his hands visible. "Mrs. Mercer, I'm here to talk, nothing more." "Then talk. Mr. Crowe wants to meet. Just you and him, no weapons, neutral ground. He's willing to negotiate." "Negotiate what?" Silas shouted. "Our surrender? Terms. A way to end this that doesn't involve more bloodshed. He's prepared to offer compensation for your losses, safe passage out of the territory, even return of your ranch. All he asks is that you stop the attacks." It was tempting. So tempting, Vivian felt herself actually considering it. She could take the money, take her land back, go to Denver, and get her children. They could start over, rebuild their lives. All she had to do was stop fighting. But she'd seen what Crowe's promises were worth, had seen him lie in court, had watched him burn a town to make a point. His word meant nothing. This was a trap. Had to be. "Tell Crowe," she called back, "that I'll meet with him. But not alone. I bring my people, and we meet somewhere public. Black Hollow, in the town square, tomorrow at noon. He shows up with more than 5 men, the deal's off." Dutch nodded. "I'll deliver your terms. He won't like them, but I'll deliver them. That's all I ask." Dutch and his men rode away, and Vivian turned to find her entire group staring at her. "You're not actually considering this," Silas said. "Please tell me you're not that stupid." "I'm considering it. Doesn't mean I trust it. But if there's a chance to end this without more people dying, don't I have to take it?" "There's no chance. This is Crowe setting a trap. You walk into Black Hollow, you walk into an ambush." "Maybe. Or maybe he really is tired of fighting. Maybe we've hurt him enough that he wants peace. And maybe I'm the Queen of England," Sarah muttered. "Vivian, this is suicide." "Then I'll die. But I'll die knowing I tried everything, including peace." She knew they were right, knew this was probably a trap, probably would get her killed. But she was so tired of fighting, so tired of being afraid, and maybe, just maybe, there was a chance Crowe actually wanted to negotiate. Probably not, but maybe. "All right," she said. "We go to Black Hollow, all of us, armed, ready for trouble. If it's a trap, we fight our way out. And if it's not—" She trailed off, not sure how to finish that sentence. "If it's not," Silas said quietly, "then maybe this nightmare finally ends." They rode for Black Hollow at first light, knowing they might not survive the day. Black Hollow looked like a war zone. Buildings still stood half-burned, their charred frames black against the morning sky. The streets were empty except for scattered debris and the occasional person moving quickly from shadow to shadow, eyes down, trying to be invisible. It was a town that had learned the price of defiance and decided survival was better than courage. Vivian rode in at the head of their group, 11 people armed and ready for whatever was coming. They'd left the others at a camp 5 miles out, backup in case this went completely wrong. The town square was ahead, and she could already see people gathering, not just Crowe's men, but townspeople, dozens of them, maybe more, all watching from windows and doorways. "This feels wrong," Silas murmured beside her. "Too many people. Too exposed. Everything about this feels wrong, but we're here now." They dismounted at the edge of the square. Caleb Crowe was already there, standing in the center like he owned it, which, in a way, he did. He was flanked by Dutch Keller and 4 other men, just as promised. All armed, but their weapons were holstered. Behind them, Sheriff Monroe stood looking uncomfortable, his badge catching the sun. Crowe himself looked older than Vivian remembered. Still imposing, still radiating that casual authority of someone who'd never been told no. But there were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before, a tightness to his jaw that spoke of stress and sleepless nights. Good. She hoped he'd suffered. Mrs. Mercer, Crowe said as she approached. His voice was cordial, almost friendly. Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would. I'm not in the habit of ignoring invitations, even from murderers. The smile on Crowe's face didn't waver. I see we're starting with accusations. That's fine. I expected as much. But perhaps we could discuss this more civilly? I've brought chairs, refreshments. We can talk like reasonable adults. I'll stand. Thanks. Suit yourself. Crowe gestured at the gathered crowd. I wanted witnesses. People who could hear what I'm about to propose, verify that I'm acting in good faith. Because despite what you think of me, Mrs. Mercer, I'm not a monster. I'm a businessman, and good business sometimes requires compromise. What are you offering? Peace. An end to this conflict that's costing us both dearly. You've hurt me. I won't deny that. The timber yard, the dam, my cattle. You've cost me nearly $100,000, but I'm prepared to absorb those losses if it means ending this violence. Vivian waited. There was more coming. Men like Crowe didn't offer peace out of goodness. Here are my terms, Crowe continued. You and your people leave this territory. I don't care where you go, California, Oregon, back east. Just go. In exchange, I'll pay you $50,000. Enough to start over, build a new life. I'll also ensure no charges are filed against you or your associates for the various crimes you've committed. Clean slate, clean break. And my ranch? Remains mine. I acquired it legally after your late husband's unfortunate passing. But I'm willing to be generous with the compensation. $50,000 is more than that land's worth. It was a good offer. Too good. Vivian could take that money, go to Denver, get her children, start over somewhere Crowe's shadow didn't reach. She could build a new life. Maybe even be happy again. But Thomas would still be dead. The people who died fighting Crowe would still be dead. And Crowe would still be here, crushing anyone who dared resist him. No, she said. Crowe's smile finally faltered. No? No, I'm not leaving. I'm not taking your money, and I'm not letting you pretend you're anything other than what you are. A tyrant who's gotten away with murder for years. Mrs. Mercer, I urge you to reconsider. This is a generous offer. More generous than you deserve, frankly. Turn it down and we go back to war. And I promise you, that's a war you cannot win. Maybe not. But I can make you bleed. I can cost you money, time, sleep. I can make sure everyone in this territory knows exactly what you are. And eventually, someone with actual authority will pay attention. The territorial governor, the U.S. Marshals. Someone will come asking questions you can't buy your way out of. Crowe's face darkened. You're making a mistake. I've made plenty of those. Well, what's one more? The tension in the square had ratcheted up to something physical, something you could taste. Crowe's men had shifted, hands drifting toward their weapons. Vivian's group did the same. In the windows and doorways, townspeople watched with the fascinated horror of people about to witness violence. Then someone else spoke up. She's right, you know. Everyone turned. Pete Walsh stepped forward from the crowd, his face bruised but determined. You are a tyrant, Crowe. You've been bleeding this town dry for years, and we're tired of it. All of us. Pete, you should... Sheriff Monroe started to say, but Pete cut him off. What? I should be quiet? Keep my head down? I tried that. Watched you kill my son and said nothing because I was afraid. But I'm done being afraid. And I think a lot of other people are too. More people were stepping forward now. Henderson and his wife, the Yamamotos, Tom and Alice. Even people Vivian didn't recognize, townspeople who'd kept quiet during her trial, who'd watched Black Hollow burn and said nothing. They were moving into the square, forming a loose circle around Vivian and her group. You can't buy us all, Mrs. Henderson said. Can't threaten us all. There's more of us than there are of you. Sheriff Monroe looked panicked. Now hold on, everyone just calm down. Shut up, Monroe, Crowe snapped. He was scanning the crowd, calculating numbers, probably doing the same math Vivian was. At least 40 people now, maybe 50. More than his 5 men could handle. More than even his entire force back at the compound could handle if they decided to fight. This is mob rule, Crowe said, his voice carrying across the square. "You're letting this woman turn you into criminals. Everything I've built here, all the prosperity—" "Prosperity?" someone shouted from the crowd. "My family's starving because we can't afford your water fees." "My business is gone because you burned it down," another voice added. "You killed my brother." The accusations came from everywhere, a chorus of grievances that had been building for years. Crowe stood in the center of it, and for the first time since Vivian had known him, he looked uncertain, looked almost afraid. "You can't do this," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "I own this territory. I own all of you." "No," Vivian said quietly. "You don't. You never did. You just made us believe you did. But we're done believing." Crowe's hand moved toward his weapon. Vivian saw it happening, saw the desperation in his eyes. She was faster. Her rifle came up smooth, barrel centered on his chest. "Don't," she said. "Please don't make me do this." Time seemed to freeze. Everyone in the square holding their breath, waiting to see what happened next. Crowe's hand hovered over his revolver, trembling slightly. His men were ready to draw, but they were hopelessly outnumbered. If shooting started, they'd all die. Slowly, Crowe raised his hands. "This isn't over," he said. "Yes, it is." The new voice came from the edge of the square. A man on horseback, wearing a badge that caught the sunlight. "United States Marshal," the badge read. Behind him were 6 more riders, all armed, all official. The marshal dismounted and walked into the square, his eyes taking in the scene with professional detachment. "I'm Marshal Edward Harding, out of Santa Fe. Received some interesting reports about this territory. Corruption, violence, possible murder. Thought I'd come see for myself." He looked at Crowe. "You must be Caleb Crowe." "I am. And you're making a mistake, Marshal. This woman and her gang have committed numerous crimes. Arson, theft, assault. You should be arresting them, not—" "I'll decide who gets arrested," Harding interrupted. "Right now, I'm more interested in hearing about a rancher named Thomas Mercer, drowned in 3 feet of water, I'm told, with a bullet in his back." Vivian's heart leaped. Someone had told the marshals. Someone had gotten word out about Thomas's murder. She caught Sarah's eye and saw the subtle nod. Sarah had done it. Somehow she'd gotten word to the territorial authorities. "That was ruled an accident," Sheriff Monroe said quickly. "Local jurisdiction, nothing to do with—" "Local jurisdiction that you happen to oversee, Sheriff, while being on Mr. Crowe's payroll. That about right?" Harding pulled out a notebook. "I've got statements from 3 witnesses saying they saw Crowe's men in the area the night Mercer died. I've got records showing you received significant payments from Crowe around the same time. And I've got a very angry widow who's been fighting back the only way she could." "This is ridiculous," Crowe sputtered. "You can't possibly—" "I can and I am. Caleb Crowe, you're under arrest for suspicion of murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and about a dozen other charges I'll figure out once I get you back to Santa Fe. You'll get a trial, a real one, not whatever passes for justice in this town." Crowe's face went purple with rage. "Do you know who I am? Do you have any idea what kind of connections I have? I'll have your badge for this. You're welcome to try, but right now, you're coming with me." Harding nodded to his deputies, who moved forward with shackles. That's when Dutch Keller made his move. His hand dropped to his gun, clearing leather fast. But Silas was faster. His revolver barked once, and Dutch went down clutching his shoulder. The other deputies had their weapons out instantly, covering Crowe's remaining men. "Anyone else want to try something stupid?" Harding asked mildly. "No? Good. I'm tired and I'd like to get back to Santa Fe before it gets too hot." They shackled Crowe and loaded him onto a horse. He was still protesting, still threatening, but it rang hollow now. A tyrant stripped of his power was just a man, smaller than he'd seemed, almost pathetic. The townspeople watched in stunned silence as the marshals prepared to leave. Harding paused beside Vivian. "You Mrs. Mercer?" "I am." "You've caused quite a bit of trouble. Arson, theft, destruction of property. By rights, I should arrest you too." Vivian's hand tightened on her rifle. "Try it." Harding smiled. "Relax. I'm not interested in arresting desperate people who were defending themselves. But you need to stop now. The violence, the raids, all of it. Crowe's going to trial. Let the law handle this from here. The law didn't handle it before. I know, and that's on us. But it's different now. I promise you that. He tipped his hat. Get your life back, Mrs. Mercer. You've earned it. They rode out with Crowe in chains, and the square erupted into chaotic celebration. People were crying, laughing, hugging each other, years of fear releasing all at once. Vivian stood in the center of it, feeling numb. It was over. Actually, over. Crowe was gone. Silas appeared beside her, holstering his weapon. We won! Can you believe it? We actually won. Thomas is still dead. Those 5 men we lost are still dead. Black Hollow's still half burned. I know, but Crowe's going to pay for it. That's something. That's more than we had yesterday. It was. And slowly, Vivian felt something unfamiliar stirring in her chest. Not happiness, exactly. She wasn't sure she remembered what happiness felt like, but maybe something close to it. Maybe peace, or at least the possibility of peace. Sarah pushed through the crowd and grabbed Vivian in a fierce hug. We did it. It's over. Is it? The fighting is. The rest, rebuilding, healing, dealing with the trauma, that's going to take time. But yeah, the war's over. We won. The celebration continued for hours. Someone broke out whiskey. Someone else started playing a fiddle. The whole town seemed determined to squeeze every drop of joy from this moment, to make up for years of fear in a single afternoon. But Vivian found herself drifting away from it, walking to the edge of town where the cemetery sat on a small hill. Thomas's grave was easy to find, still fresh, the wooden marker she'd carved herself weathered but readable. She knelt beside it, suddenly exhausted. It's done, she said quietly. Crowe's arrested. They're going to try him for what he did to you. I don't know if that's justice, but it's something. The wind rustled through the grass, carrying the sounds of celebration up from the town. Vivian closed her eyes and let herself feel everything she'd been holding back. The grief, the rage, the bone-deep exhaustion. Let it wash through her without trying to control it. I'm going to get the kids, she continued. Bring them home. Try to build something here, something good. I don't know if I can do it. Don't know if I'm even the same person who lived with you, who was content with small things and simple days, but I'm going to try. Footsteps behind her. She turned to find Pete standing there, hat in his hands. Sorry to interrupt. Just wanted to say thank you for not giving up, for fighting when the rest of us were too scared. I was scared too, still am. But you did it anyway. That's what matters. He hesitated. I'm going to rebuild. The store, I mean. And I'm going to make sure I stock enough supplies for your ranch, once you get it back. Will I get it back? Crowe owned it legally. Doesn't matter. Won't hold up now that he's arrested for murder. The territorial court will sort it out, but my guess is they give it back to you. Might take time, but it'll happen. After Pete left, Vivian sat alone for a while longer, thinking about the woman she'd been and the woman she'd become, thinking about what violence had cost her and what it had taught her. She'd learned she could kill without hesitation when survival demanded it, learned she could lead, could inspire, could make decisions that got people killed and live with the consequences. She'd learned she was harder than she'd thought, but also more fragile. That courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the willingness to act despite it. That sometimes the only thing separating tyranny from freedom was one person's decision to stand up and say no. Most importantly, she'd learned that there were things worth fighting for, worth dying for even. And that knowing when to fight and when to seek peace was maybe the hardest lesson of all. She stood and walked back down to the town, where the celebration was still going. Sarah intercepted her with a cup of whiskey. Drink, Sarah ordered. You've earned it. Vivian drank. It burned going down, but in a good way. Around them, people were already making plans. How to rebuild the burned buildings. How to replace the corrupt sheriff with someone honest. How to make sure nothing like Crowe could ever happen again. What are you going to do? Sarah asked. After you get your kids back, I mean. Ranch. Same as before. Try to make a living, raise my children, maybe find some peace. Vivian looked at her. What about you? Reopen the school, teach these kids that they don't have to accept tyranny as normal, that they can fight back against injustice without losing their humanity. Sarah smiled. Someone's got to make sure the next generation's better than we were. Over the next few weeks, things slowly returned to something approaching normal. The territorial court moved quickly on Crowe's case, faster than anyone expected. Turned out when you arrested someone with that many enemies, witnesses materialized everywhere. People who'd been too scared to speak up suddenly had no problem testifying. Crowe was convicted of murder in the first degree, conspiracy, extortion. The list went on and on. They sentenced him to hang, which caused some controversy. Some people thought it was too harsh. Others thought he should have been hanged twice. Vivian didn't attend the execution. Didn't need to see it to know it was done. She was in Denver by then, standing outside her sister's house, hands shaking as she knocked on the door. Emily answered. For a moment she just stared. Then she screamed, "Mama!" and launched herself forward. Samuel was right behind her, both of them crying and talking over each other and holding on like they'd never let go. "I kept my promise," Vivian said, tears streaming down her face. "I came back." "We knew you would," Emily said. "Didn't we, Samuel? We knew Mama would come back." They stayed in Denver for 2 weeks, giving the children time to adjust, to understand that it was really over. Then they went home to Black Hollow and the ranch that was legally Vivian's again. It looked different than she remembered, smaller somehow, less significant. But it was home. Silas helped them settle back in. He'd decided to stay in the territory, at least for a while. Said he'd spent enough time running, and maybe it was time to see what staying felt like. He'd taken a job as a deputy, the new sheriff had asked him personally. Apparently having the legendary Silas Kane on your side was good for maintaining order. "You going to be okay here?" he asked Vivian one evening after helping repair the barn roof. "I don't know. Ask me in a year." "Fair enough." He paused. "You did good. Better than good. You saved this territory from a monster. That means something. It means I killed people, broke laws, became someone my children barely recognize. It means you protected what mattered. There's a difference between becoming a monster and doing monstrous things for the right reasons. The fact that you're worried about it proves you're still human." He left, and Vivian stood on her porch watching the sunset. Emily and Samuel were inside, arguing about something silly, the way siblings do. It was such a normal sound, such a beautiful sound, that Vivian felt her throat tighten. Life went on. The ranch slowly recovered. Black Hollow rebuilt itself, better this time, with laws that applied to everyone and a sheriff who couldn't be bought. Sarah reopened her school. Pete rebuilt his store. The Hendersons expanded their operation now that Crowe wasn't strangling them with fees. There were scars, of course. Buildings that would never be rebuilt. People who'd never come back. Vivian herself woke up screaming sometimes, reliving the violence, seeing Dutch Keller fall over and over again. But the nightmares came less frequently as time passed. The wounds began to heal, even if they'd never fully disappear. 6 months after Crowe's execution, Vivian stood in the same cemetery where she'd knelt at Thomas's grave. But this time she wasn't alone. The whole town was there, dedicating a memorial to everyone who'd died in what people were already calling the Black Hollow Resistance. Thomas's name was there. So were the 5 men who'd died during the cattle drive. Martha Higgins, who'd been killed in the wagon crash, James Walsh, Pete's son, and a dozen others, people who'd resisted Crowe over the years and paid the ultimate price. "They didn't die for nothing," the new mayor said during his speech. "They died so we could live free, so our children could grow up without fear. We owe them a debt we can never fully repay, but we can honor their memory by making sure nothing like Caleb Crowe ever happens again." After the ceremony, people came up to Vivian one by one, thanking her, telling her she'd saved them. She accepted their gratitude with as much grace as she could manage, even though inside she still felt like a fraud. She hadn't saved anyone. She'd just refused to be crushed, and somehow that had been enough. Emily tugged at her sleeve. "Mama, can we go home now? I'm tired." "Sure, sweetheart, let's go home." They walked back to the ranch together, the 3 of them, and Vivian realized that somewhere along the way she'd stopped looking over her shoulder, stopped waiting for the next attack, the next crisis. She was still scarred, still broken in places that would probably never heal right. But she was alive. Her children were alive. And that was enough. That night, after the kids were asleep, Vivian sat on the porch and looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, Thomas was watching. Or maybe he wasn't. Maybe death was just nothing, just silence. She didn't know. But she hoped, in whatever way that made sense, that he was proud, that he understood she'd done the best she could with what she had. The frontier was still brutal, still unforgiving, but it was also full of people trying to build something better, trying to carve out lives worth living from the harsh landscape. And maybe that was enough. Maybe that's all anyone could do. Keep trying, keep fighting, keep believing that tomorrow might be better than today. Vivian had learned she was capable of terrible things when pushed, had learned that violence sometimes was the answer, that fighting back sometimes was necessary. But she'd also learned that the point of fighting wasn't the violence itself. It was what came after, the chance to rebuild, to heal, to create something worth protecting. She'd never be the woman she was before Thomas died. That woman was gone, buried alongside him. But maybe the woman she'd become was stronger, wiser, more capable of protecting what mattered. Maybe that was worth something too. In the end, the story people told about Black Hollow wasn't really about Vivian Mercer. It was about ordinary people finding extraordinary courage when they had no other choice. About a town that had learned to stand together instead of falling apart. About the simple truth that tyrants only rule as long as people let them. Vivian went inside, checked on her sleeping children one more time, and went to bed. Tomorrow she'd wake up and work the ranch. The day after that, she'd do it again. And slowly, day by day, she'd build a life that Thomas would have been proud of. A life that honored everyone who'd fought and died. A life that was, finally, her own. The war was over. The healing had begun. And in the brutal territory that had tried to break her, Vivian Mercer had become something more dangerous than any outlaw or tyrant. She'd become a symbol of what ordinary people could accomplish when they finally decided enough was enough. That was her legacy. That was what would outlast all the violence and fear, the simple knowledge that courage, once found, could never be fully taken away.